Good.
All right, it's 2 o'clock. Welcome everyone to the February 7th, 2025 regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District Board meeting. We'll start with roll call.
Okay, Mediterranean,
Here.
Epstein,
Present.
Schroeder, here. Tucker, absent. Dornbrook here. 4 to 5.
Okay, great, thank you.
Is Chris, do you know if he's on his way?
He supposedly is in Valley.
Okay.
Oh, he's in Valley. He is in Valley. I know.
Oh, it's a lot of traffic.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to announcements. Agenda item 3.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the regularly scheduled Kirkwood Meadows PUD board meeting. If you are on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function if you would like to speak. And if you are here in person, please stand at the podium and speak from there and identify yourself, please.
Excellent, thank you, Eric. Are there any corrections to the agenda or the consent item calendar? Sorry.
No.
Anyone else? Okay. Not hearing any, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. Comments from the audience. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on any short non-agenda items that are within our jurisdiction. And I'll just state that we cannot take action or have real discussion about anything that's not listed on the agenda. So if you have a comment about something that's on the agenda, let's wait to that agenda item, please. But if you have something that's not on the agenda, this would be the time to voice that. Okay, Eric, I don't see any hands on Zoom either. Okay, so no comments from the public there. We'll do the number 6. This is written comments from the public. I would make sure to acknowledge to the board that there were some comments written in the board packet. Thank the community for the feedback and acknowledge that, and ask board members to make sure to consider them in our deliberations when they're related to those topics. Okay. Item number 7, adoption of the consent calendar.
Move to adopt the consent calendar.
Thank you.
A second.
Second. Okay, and we can do a voice vote, Eric.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. There are no items that brought forward for number 8, so we're going to move on to items for board action. Agenda item 9. We'll start with 9A. This is a KVFD 218 engineering assessment study. Eric, I'll hand it over to you to talk about this.
Sure. So I'd like to introduce our consultant, Ed Espinoza and Brandon Holzhauer, who have been working on this. This is just a presentation on the 30,000-foot elevation of the assessment study. And in March, the actual engineer's report will be presented to the board. So with that, I will stop sharing and let you share, Brandon.
Right. Good afternoon, members of the board and residents of Kirkwood. Am I coming in clearly?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, we can hear you. I can hear you perfectly. So this afternoon, the purpose of the presentation is to present an overview of the proposed fire assessment. Next slide. Your Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department, otherwise known as KVFD, provides fire and emergency response services within Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District and is in need to transition from a volunteer-based staffing to fully paid staff to continue services. Current funding for your fire services is approximately $300,000 annually, as shown in the budget that I believe is page 43 of your board packet. And in order to continue services, we need about 1.2 million more annually to be able to adequately provide the services necessary. An attempt to generate that additional revenue occurred back in 2023 when a special tax, otherwise known as Measure E, was brought forth to the voters within Kirkwood, and it was not successful. And so here we are today. Staff has asked Francisco and Associates to assist the district with forming a fire assessment to secure the necessary funding going forward. Next slide. The proposed fire assessment is pursuant to the Fire Suppression Act and Proposition 218, and the assessments within the boundaries of the district must be based on benefit to property and proportionate share of budget, which we'll talk about a little later in a subsequent slide. If approved by property owners, the assessment would be paid through the KMPUD utility bills. And funding would provide 24/7 personnel coverage that would consist of a duty officer that would provide oversight and management, an engineer that would operate fire apparatus and provide firefighting and emergency services, and a firefighter/EMT. Proposition 218 governs all assessment districts in the state of California. It went into effect back in 1996, and there's some very important requirements and constraints as it relates to assessment districts pursuant to Prop 218. The first being that only special benefit to property can be assessed, meaning any general benefit that's attributed to the public at large has to be quantified and must be paid from another funding source. The assessment methodology that distributes the special benefit to property has to be proportional to the benefit received and therefore account for differing parcel characteristics and land use types. Also, pursuant to Prop 218, an engineer's report is required to be prepared as part of the process by a registered engineer in the state. Notices and ballots must be mailed to each affected property owner a minimum of 45 days prior to a scheduled public hearing. And what determines whether or not the assessment passes is based on the return ballots. And a majority of the return ballots cannot oppose the assessment in order for the legislative body to move forward and approve it, with the caveat that ballots are weighted by the proposed assessment. As an example, if a single-family home is proposed to pay $1,500 a year and a condominium is proposed to pay $1,000 a year, the ballot for the single-family home would have 1.5 times the weight that of the condominium. Next slide, please. Let's get into the benefit analysis and how that works. The first step was to determine what are the benefits and who benefits. And in collaboration with your fire chief and your GM, it was determined that virtually all of the benefit of the fire services being provided are to the properties within the boundaries of the district, with very minimal to no general benefit to the public at large. With that said, we've attributed 5% of the budget to general benefit just to acknowledge incidental benefit. And there's also a small segment of public right-of-way that service, and we wanted to acknowledge that. And so we've included a 5% general benefit in the calculations to acknowledge that fact. And therefore, what that means is the remaining 95% of the budget is attributed to special benefit and would be accessible to properties within the district. So the benefit of methodology, what we've done is it'll take into account land use type, building area, lot area or parcel area, and the demand placed on services. Next slide, please. The assessment is comprised of two components. The first being the land component, which is a representation of the fact that the fire services protect underlying land, which preserve property values. And then there's the building component, which is a representation of the fact that fire services also protect structures and safeguards people. We collected county data from Amador, Alpine, and El Dorado. So we have parcel data for all the properties within the boundaries of KMPUD. And what we identified from that parcel data is that on average, about 25% of the total property value within KMPUD is attributed to land, and 75% of the value is attributed to improvements or buildings or structures. So what that told us is that we could segregate the budget for the purposes of the assessment accordingly. So what we did is we attributed 25% of the budget to the land component and 75% of the budget to the building component. Next slide, please. So how do we apply the assessment? For the land component, the assessment is applied using a flat rate per lot square foot, so pretty straightforward. The building component is based on industry standard service population commonly used across the state by land use type. And so what I mean by that is, on average, a single family home has about 3 people per household. Condominiums, it's about 3/4 of a single family home on average. And multifamily, apartment, timeshare type property, on average, is usually about 2/3 that of a single family home. And then on the non-residential side, on average, commercial property has about two employees per 1,000 square feet, building square feet. Office is about 3 per 1,000 building square feet, and industrial is on the lower side with about 1 on average per 1,000 building square feet. And what these service population designations allowed us to do is establish proportionality in the assessments, and that's where these the equivalent dwelling units, or EDUs, comes into play. What an EDU is, it's essentially a ratio to the single family home. So you'll notice in the table here where it outlines the EDUs assigned to each land use type, that the single family home is an EDU of 1 because it's the basis for the proportionality, and every other land use type is a ratio of the single family home using those service population, those standard service population figures that I just described. So the condominium is 3/4, multifamily timeshare property is 2/3 per unit, and commercial, based on the average employees per 1,000 building square feet, they're all ratios of the single family home. Next slide, please. Commercial properties within the district create a higher demand on services during peak season. So it became apparent to us that we needed to assign an additional benefit factor to account for that additional demand. And how we did that is using energy usage data, that historical energy usage data that was available to us, and we were able to analyze. How we use that energy usage is looking at the ratio of usage peak season versus low season. Peak season being the months of November through March, and low season being the months of July through September. And in order to determine the impact that commercial or non-residential property has on the within district boundaries in the peak season, it was important to establish a baseline, because we understood that energy usage will fluctuate due to seasonal changes, right? So we needed to establish a baseline to account for that. And how we did that is we identified the residential properties within the district that are occupied full time. And what we noticed from those properties is that the ratio of peak to low usage is about 3-to-1 on average. So that was our established baseline. So we took that point of reference, and we compared that to the aggregate peak to low ratio for all properties within the boundaries of the district, and the excess or the surplus above that 3-to-1 baseline ratio was determined to be the additional benefit factor, or the impact, let's just say, that commercial properties have on the district. And that additional benefit factor was derived and determined to be 2.3. 2.3 is what that factor is. And so what we're doing with that factor is we're applying it to the commercial property assessments within the boundaries of the district. Next slide, please. So this slide is a summary of the proposed assessment rates. So let's talk about the residential properties first. As I mentioned in an earlier slide, the assessment is comprised of 2 components. So the land component for residential properties is assessed at 0.0068 per lot square foot. And the building component is $1,240 per EDU, an EDU being a single family home. So a condominium, when it comes to the building component, would be paying $930, and timeshare multifamily property is about $830, I believe. So the total assessment for the residential property is the combination of is the sum of the land and the building component. On the commercial side, commercial and office, it's similar or very same approach. Land component, however, the assessment rate is 0.0157 per lot square foot, and how that's calculated is taking the residential and applying the additional benefit factor of 2.3. And same thing on the building component side. We took the rate per EDU of 1240 and applied the additional benefit factor of 2.3, and that's what gets us the 2,852 per EDU per 1,000 building square feet or square foot, because on the non-residential side, the assessment is applied for the building component. It's applied on a building square foot basis. And similar to residential, the total assessment is the sum of the land component and the building component. The assessments for both residential and commercial are proposed to increase annually by the published CPI, published by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics for the month of April, and that increase would occur for the first time in 2026. So it would go into effect in July of 2026. Next slide, please. On this slide, we have a couple example calculations. So let's go through an example of a single-family home, or the average single-family home. On the land component side, we take the assessment rate of $0.0068 per lot square foot. And in the case of this example, the single-family home has a lot square footage of 18,000. So the land component assessment is $122 for this example. On the building component side, it's very straightforward. All single-family homes are assessed the same, so it would be $1,240 for the building component. And so the total assessment is the sum of the two, which would get us to the 1,362. In aggregate, residential parcels are allocated about $740,000 of the total proposed assessment, or approximately 61% of the budget. And so if we're looking at an example for a commercial parcel, and in this example, on the land side, for 20,000 lot square feet, and if we apply the assessment rate of 0.0157, the land component of the assessment is $314. And if we have a 2,000 building square foot parcel, the building component assessment is $3,822. If we're applying the 0.67 EDUs for a commercial parcel, and so the sum of the two results in a total assessment of $4,136. And the total allocation for commercial parcels is a little over $460,000, or approximately 39% of the total budget. Next slide, please. So that concludes the presentation. This afternoon, staff's recommending that the board authorize us to take the next step, which would be to prepare the engineer's report and come back to the board for approval prior to mailing out the required notices and ballots pursuant to Prop 218. So with that, I'm happy to address any questions the board or members of the public may have. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it. What we'll do here is we'll have public comments on, again, very specifically, I want to make sure it's on what you just heard in the presentation. So if there are questions and comments on the formulation, then we'll have board discussion. See a couple of hands coming up, so we'll try to limit it to a couple of minutes, or we usually say 3 minutes. So we'll please keep people on track with that. And so If anyone in the room would like to speak, I invite you to come to the podium and go speak at the podium so that we can hear you on the microphones and everyone hear you. And if you're online, you can use your raise your hand feature and we'll use it that way. So
Where's the mic? This is the mic.
that's the mic. They can, we've tried to test it before. If you speak loudly, we should hear you well on that mic. So thank you.
My name is Pedro Lizaur,
Mhm.
444 East Meadows. I have just one question in terms of the yearly escalation. Why are you using the San Francisco Bay Area index, where it will be much more appropriate? Anything that is around here, it could be Reno, it can be someplace in Nevada. Why the San Francisco? It appears to me that you guys are trying to increase things, probably over and above, but it will apply to this area.
Thank you.
So the answer to that is that's the CPI we use for all of our rate studies. It's the nearest big city in California. Nevada is not analogous at all to us, and that's the one that the district has used for decades. So it's consistency with the rate studies.
The fact that you have done it in the past.
Speak up there if you'd like to speak.
I would argue that Sacramento is not that much further. San Francisco is a very expensive city. This is a whole separate thing we're doing right now. You wanted this to win, you need to be realistic about your costs and your increases. And you want to rethink that regardless of what you've done in the past, because what we did in the past didn't work. Thank you. It was Bob Williams, 140 Glove Rock.
Thank you.
So Bob, your proposal is look at the Sacramento.
Look at Sacramento. Just not San Francisco.
Relations about the same. Go ahead.
Howard Hoffman from KMA. 45 years ago, when I first came up here, I helped shoot down a similar proposal to this. It wanted to allocate something like 0.75 or 0.67 for a condominium versus a single family home. We have lots of condominiums here that cost more than a lot of the homes in KMA. And so I can't see why we get a 25% discount for having a condo. Doesn't make any sense at all. And furthermore, many of the condos here in terms of cost and hazard, if you have a fire in a single family home, you're probably just going to have that home go up in flame. If you have a condo that gets caught on fire, the whole building's subject to going up. So I think there's additional hazard with condominiums, and I can't see why they get a discount.
Can we speak to the rationale with that, please?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question and great comment. So one of the things with this assessment, that's why one of the reasons we decided to segregate it into two components, the land component and the building component, is so that we could account for, a variety of potential factors, right? And so when it comes to the land component and condominium complexes specifically, we accounted for common area space. So we took any common area space associated with the condominium complex. We took that area and assigned it to each condo that corresponds to the complex pro rata share based on their building square footage. So it's not, the assessment is not, exactly 2/3 that of a single family home for timeshares and multifamily, and for condominiums, it's not exactly 3/4 of that of a single family home, because we do have this land component portion of the assessment that does account for common areas. With that said, it is an industry standard to use these service population ratios. So this isn't something that's specific to Kirkwood, or, it's really widely used across the state. But it's not a perfect science, right? But there has to be something that we can consistently apply across the board that is reasonable and consistent and defensible. So that's why we took that approach.
Thank you.
Hi, excuse me, I'm Alan Sapp, 159 here on the west side. I have a question on your methodology. You attribute 95% of this benefit to the real estate values here in the valley. That implies that Kirkwood Fire Department or Rescue will not serve anybody on Highway 88 as we have in the past. Is that correct?
Well, a couple, I guess, clarification points. 95% of the budget we've attributed to special benefit, meaning we're assessing properties within the district. With that said, my understanding as it relates to the services being provided is that there are some services being provided outside of district boundaries and public right of way, but it's more than offset by the other services providers and what they're doing and the services they're providing to properties within the boundaries of the district, meaning any services KVFD is doing outside is being more than offset by what the services being provided within. And therefore, it's, it could be, it wasn't accounted for.
That wasn't accounted for, and we don't have any way to quantify it.
We don't have any way of quantifying what exactly, Sarah?
Well, you're suggesting that those services are even, but we don't have any data.
I think we do have data on that front, and I defer to the fire chief to speak to that. But I think we do have data to support the services that are provided by other providers within the boundaries more than offsetting the inverse. So I don't know if maybe the fire chief can.
I think that's going to be a good sales point. If you are wanting this community to vote for this, is somebody has to be realistic about how much we actually spend outside of the valley. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a great question.
Okay, if there are no other comments in the room here, let's go to Zoom. So Eric, could you please take people off and one by one?
I'd like to ask Rick to shortly address the previous point. Simply, we've heard several times the mutual aid, I believe it's called. Just in a sentence or two, could you, as the fire chief, address this question?
Sure. I mean, we definitely track numbers for calls within the valley, calls outside the valley, so we can quantify, how many calls are received in Amador or Alpine. Very few in El Dorado. But we do have a mutual aid agreement with the Amador Fire Protection District, which they do pay us per call as well as work comp reimbursement on an annual basis. And then the agreement with Alpine County is that we basically share resources. If we have a major structure fire, say the powerhouse or corporate employee housing, they're our primary mutual aid that comes and helps us. And so it goes both ways. They also provide our dispatching, which we do not pay for, which is quite expensive.
Alpine County does?
Alpine County via Douglas Communications.
That's our dispatching.
So we do have a good relationship with both Alpine and Amador County, and we share resources back and forth.
You've said in previous meetings that the mutual aid is equal
Chris,
at best, and that if anything, Kirkwood benefits maybe even more just in terms of they help us, we help them. Is that true?
I believe so, if I understand what you're asking.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Make sure you get to the community too. We'll have more discussion opportunity later.
Eric Rickert, you're up.
Okay, am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
I just have a couple questions, which I'll ask. How is employee housing counted? Is it residential? Is it commercial?
Residential.
Residential housing, was that the question, Mr. Reichert?
Yes, the employee housing.
Got it. So the basis in terms of how the land uses were assigned, it's primarily based on county data, county use codes. So if the property has the multifamily type use to it or use code, it most likely is being assigned a multifamily use and being assessed per unit. If it is not assigned a multifamily use by the county, we're most likely treating it as commercial. And so I probably would have to take a look at the specific parcel that you're asking about, and we'd have to maybe look into it a little further and get back to you. But that's generally how it works. Is the county use code was the driver to the designation.
I think it'll be important to include that detail in the study because there are quite a number of units of housing in Kirkwood, and it'd be nice to know whether or not each room is being assessed 3/4 of an EDU or if it's being assessed at 3 people per 1,000 square feet, which may or may not be realistic in these units. So it'd be good to include that in the study. I hope to see that in the study. Second is land used as parking. Does that have any assessment at all?
Parking lots or
Yes, parking lots.
It does if it's part of a common area or a condo complex, but and yes, because it's taken into account in the land component of the assessment. So if it's unless it's public right of way, which my understanding there's virtually no public right of way within the boundaries of the district, it's accounted for in the land component of the assessment.
Okay, so the parking lots are assessed at one of the land use rates.
At the land assessment.
The land component of it.
That's exactly it.
And finally, will the public, in your study, when the public has access to the full study, will we have visibility into how much weighting each property has, so we know how much the relative voting is going to be?
You will. As part of the process, we're required to produce what we refer to as an assessment roll, which is essentially, the assessment by parcel. So if you have, your APN, your address, you can go on and view that document, and you're going to be able to know who's paying or who's proposed to pay what.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
I think Carrie Lukács is up next.
Mute.
You unmute, Carrie.
Yeah, thank you so much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, I want to say that there's just an impressive amount of work that's been done on this and lots of detail as to the nitty gritty of sort of how to make this work. But given that the community did not support this proposal in the past, and that it does cost KMPUD money to advance this ballot initiative, I would like to recommend that at the highest level, there be a case made to the community as to why this is the way to go, building our own fire department versus other options. For example, I keep asking, why not CAL FIRE or the Forestry Service? I live in a very rural area in San Mateo County. I have a CAL FIRE station from my house 5 minutes away. I think they're thrilled to be there, and they're very effective. These entities already have expertise and resources on providing fire services, and to all of our benefit, they could leverage this expertise into our valley and really, make it an even stronger offering. There's also the additional benefit that these kinds of entities already have taxpayer funding. As a homeowner, I pay a lot in property taxes to Alpine County, and I receive almost nothing in return. I have to we have to self-fund our roads, private roads for our neighborhoods. We have to pay extra for clearing of snow. We don't really have much security coverage unless it's paid for. And so I'm curious what has been done to explore accessing some of these already paid property taxes to potentially fund what is really a regional benefit, to have a fire station and presence of some sort within our valley, and potentially staffed and provided by an outside entity with, frankly, greater expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. There were a number of questions in there. Rick, would you like to take all of them? Do you want me to take some of them? How would you like to
If
proceed?
you'd like to start, then I can fill in the blanks.
Sure.
Or I can-
So I'll start with a couple of items there. The current leading proposal is not for us to build this our own. It is to contract out the service with Amador Fire Protection District. That is the offer that we were given with the lowest cost option. So that is part of it. You mentioned property taxes. Property taxes do support this. That is part of the funding for what this will come from. So the total value of the proposed contract is not the full amount, because we would allocate some of the property taxes that we use to that. In terms of some of the CAL FIRE and Forest Service, we talked about that at the community forum last time on January 23rd, but maybe Rick, could you give a couple of conversations on the outreach we've done to other services, including Eastern Alpine and other areas.
Yeah, so Forest Service, again, they work in the forest. They don't necessarily provide residential or community fire protection. They'll certainly come and help if something happens in Kirkwood like they did during Caldor. But that's not necessarily an option for us. CAL FIRE comes at a cost. They don't just come and provide services for free. If anybody has a good connection with the governor and can provide that, I'm happy to hear it, but it's very expensive. Currently, CAL FIRE does not have a presence in Alpine County. They don't have a station here. But they do have a presence in Amador, the El Dorado Amador CAL FIRE district, and we've had several discussions with them that ultimately would be a lot more than contracting with the proposal with the Amador Fire Protection District to provide the service. The other avenue that we took was, well, what if we did an internal fire department? The cost for that would be significantly more than hiring Amador Fire Protection District. So that's why we're leaning that way at this point. And then finally, we've been in discussions with Eastern Alpine County Fire as well as Alpine County, and have yet to receive a formal proposal. But again, the cost would be similar to Amador Fire Protection District, and more importantly, Eastern Alpine County Fire is a volunteer fire department with a paid chief and assistant chief. They don't necessarily have the mechanism in place to provide 24-hour paid staff to provide the service that we would need.
And I just thinking a couple of other things that Carrie, you mentioned. Why are we even doing this in the first place? Because I feel like maybe you said, well, if Measure E did not pass, why are we even doing this? Well, we've had conversations after Measure E. We did a community survey, which is on the website, which were the results from February 2024, to asking about level of service and interest. And I pulled it up here real quickly, and it was talking about, about 2/3 of the community said that they were willing to pay more for fire service, and there was interest to have a high, at least some levels of service. And you can look at the details on the website. So I think the board took the action of saying maybe this Measure E wasn't the way to do it. Let's look at other ways, and that's how we've landed in this situation. I'll also touch on, we asked in that same survey, there is an opportunity to use more property taxes to fund this, which would lower the cost of this proposal. And I don't have it, I'll skim to it somewhere, but it was like, I think it was 70, 60, 2/3 said they did not want to see us use more property taxes, which would cause rates from other services we provide to go up to help fund this, to lower the cost of this. And so that is where the 1.2 nets out from, is those things coming into play.
Yeah.
Did I miss anything?
No, I think that was good, and I appreciate Carrie's questions. I mean, these are things that have come up in the past, and it's important to bring them up now. So thank you for the
I'll
questions.
simply add that from my point of view, I've observed Rick and the board making rigorous and exhaustive efforts anywhere and everywhere to talk to all potential contract partners. And the one that we have from Amador is the one and only, and in some ways a good one.
I'll answer one live question, because some people have been waiting a lot longer. So,
okay, thanks. I can't see the live ones as well.
yes,
So
no,
thank you.
I can, so that's why, if you don't mind, I'll do that.
Mhm.
I'll just a couple of these, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong. From Tara Moran, could you please discuss the KMPUD service area? Ostensibly, it's 1.87 square miles, which is Kirkwood. It's your understanding that we respond to calls outside of the area. I believe Rick answered that through mutual aid agreements. We go to as far west as Tragedy Springs and as far east as
Carson Pass.
So that's the answer for that one. And then we'll skip down to Roz, who's had their hand up for some time.
Okay, thank you.
So if you could unmute Roz. Roz Naylor.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
I should have typed this in Q&A. It's a really quick clarifying question. I think I missed how the land calculation is allocated to condo owners. If I understand it, it's the land that the condo sits on plus all the common space, then divided out by the number of units, or there is a lot of obviously inequity in terms of value of units in condos. Is it proportional to the size of your condo?
Great question, Ms. Naylor. It's proportional to the size of your condo, meaning the building square footage. So it's not, we didn't take the common area and just divide it by the number of units to spread it to the condos. We took the aggregate common area square footage and assigned it to each condo unit pro rata share of building square footage per condo.
Did that answer it, Roz?
Okay.
Go ahead.
Jeff Shannon, I saw you're in the chat, but you're also next up with their hand up in terms of time. So I'll just allow you to talk and let you ask your question again.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, first off, thanks to all of you for the hard work. I know these things are never easy, having created a sewer assessment district in my neighborhood one time, and it only took us 12 public hearings and 1,000 hours of my time. It's not easy. So first of all, I think we all want this to be equitable, and I agree with the gentleman who spoke earlier that I kind of inclined to think this should be based on hazards and like potential uses of these services rather than potentially other kind of industry standard methods that may not apply here. This is a kind of a unique situation where we have a lot of public people coming in during a period of the year, and then they're not here. And then we have homeowners who are here and condo owners who are here for part of the time, but they're also not here. And these services, kind of my sense is it's mostly EMT and residential firefighting. If there's a big outbreak of a fire, forest fire or something, we're going to have other services coming in. So with that background, I'm kind of, first off, I don't really understand why lot size for single family homeowners should be considered. We all have these little building envelopes when we built and the size of a lot doesn't seem to have any basis relationship to EMT services or residential firefighting as opposed to like square footage of a home, which may have some better relationship. And then, so I just don't think that necessarily applies here, and I'd ask you to reconsider factoring in lot size, but rather try to focus on how to get a better metric for how, who's going to use it and having the use be the basis for the fee, which then takes me to the public component. You've got a lodge that has some common areas, but then there's a lot of people in there who are likely to need EMT services. You have visitors coming in. I don't know how these kind of common areas or land-based criteria really relate to people using EMT services. It does make sense to me from a firefighting perspective. So as you go into this allocation, if you start to think about it that way, maybe there's another way to do it.
Yep,
I don't
30
have an
seconds
answer
left.
to that. Yeah. So anyway, I don't have an answer, but I put those out there as considerations. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Do you want to speak to that? And I think, from a 30,000 foot level, Jeff, this engineer's report is looking at fire services. EMT is ancillary to that and therefore not considered as a separate service in and of itself. This is a firefighting assessment that the firefighters would also be EMTs is a secondary consideration. Does that sum it up pretty well, Ed?
Yeah, it does. And the other thing is pursuant to Prop 218, the assessments have to be apportioned based on benefit to property, not benefit to people. And so when we're looking at things like lot square footage, because it's reasonable to assume that fire services being provided and being available to property owners and residents, it enhances property values because it safeguards property and all that kind of thing. And so the reason we're using lot square footage and building improved value and all that is that with that rationale in mind is we're attributing benefit to property, not necessarily benefit to people. And then the other thing is when it comes to demand on services, that was looked at, and the reason why commercial properties are being assigned that additional benefit factor, and because these properties benefit from the benefit more from the fire services being available within the boundaries of the district. So hopefully that that clarifies it a bit. With that being said, you know, there's many ways to derive a benefit analysis, especially when it comes to fire, right? And so our goal was to come up with something that was defensible and also consistent that could be applied across the board to all properties within the boundaries of the district.
Since I have you unmuted, there's another question that came up, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let you do it. How do non-building structures factor into the benefits assessment? I think the counties do it based on improvements, based on permitted structures, whether it's a ski lift or whether it's a housing for employees. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes, I believe that's the answer, Eric, on that.
Thank you. All right. Patrick Henriksen. Let me click on you here. If you could unmute.
Great. Most of my questions are going to be for Rick. So Rick, what is the cost to continue the volunteer fire department? Has that been assessed?
The annual cost is essentially $300,000 to $400,000 a year. But we do rely on a stipend from the 501c3 to offset, or we do rely on a grant to pay for a stipend currently from the KVFD 501c3, which is approximately 50,000, 56,000? 55,000 a year to support the current operations for the fire department.
I grew up in Wisconsin in rural areas. Every village or town always had a volunteer fire department. I don't think we need Amador getting involved in what we're doing here. So has somebody done an assessment of what we can do to keep the volunteer fire department and Rick Ansel as our chief? Rick? Well,
can I just, I'll interject on this because this is an important part of what we've been trying to consider. And we talked about this in the community forum as one of the three challenges. One of them is the cost, which is one that I would honestly personally say we could overcome in ways that are raising more money from a 501c3, allocating more property taxes. We can make the cost of the KVFD last longer than months. The biggest risk is that Rick Ansel is a volunteer. He has been a volunteer for 20 years. He is not paid to be our fire chief. So
we want to be. So where I grew up, everybody that was involved, usually younger people, thrived on this. Many trained doing it to become real firefighters.
We do not have anyone that has that desire in the community to become not to be the unpaid volunteer fire chief. We do not have that training. We do not have anyone who is here that wants to do that. They have other jobs here. People that are volunteers are often working for a Kirkwood Mountain Resort. They work for the district, or they're like me, they're a homeowner. And
I understand that.
But we don't have someone in the backlog to do this.
Well, we need to have a campaign and a committee set up by Rick to campaign to find new blood. That's what you do when you have a volunteer fire department. What you're talking about is assessing property owners that currently had a $13 million PG&E project with electric bills now, whether they're there or not, from $500 to $700 a month. So now you're going to assess them. And by the way, Ed, what would a 3,500 square foot single family home on 0.8 acres run? What are you telling me my assessment's going to be?
We can run that real quick. Brandon, I don't know if you want to run that real quick, but I mean, it'd be 3,500. A single family home, you'd be paying the 1,240 base EDU, right? Plus, I forget how many lot square feet did you say? Or how many acres?
Just call it an acre. It's about 0.8 acres.
0.8 acres. Okay.
I'll purse all your stuff.
Brandon, do you have that? What's the assessment rate?
I will say also, just for anyone who's available, everyone will know what their assessment opportunities will be.
That's not the reason why I'm asking this. I want to know what it is versus the current assessment that I have on my utility bill. Is there an assessment, Rick, that's currently on my utility bill for this volunteer fire department or not?
Yes.
Yes.
And how much are the homeowners paying currently for the volunteer fire department?
It varies from parcel to parcel. And yeah, so it depends on your combustible square footage currently.
Okay. I just think you guys are putting the cart before the horse. There hasn't been a benefactor fund program set up. You should have had one set up years ago with a committee with people asking for funding to assist that are willing to give to a 501c3. Very simple to do that kind of stuff. Second thing is you already have a chief who's volunteering. Then you need to go out and have a campaign. You need to have a bunch of young people, men and women, willing to volunteer. And I guarantee it, they will. The other thing is, how many fires have we had in the last 5 years in Kirkwood? Other than on Fremont, where we had 2 of them blow up in 1 year.
All right. I mean, I think Rick, I think we're coming up on time on this question, but if you want to address some of these final thoughts here.
Patrick, all good questions and appreciate you asking them, but for recruiting, it's an ongoing basis. Our doors are always open at 4:30 on Wednesday for anybody to show up. But just keep in mind, Kirkwood's a bit of an island. There isn't a lot of young people that work and live here year round. And through networking, working with the ski resort, and homeowners have tapped on a lot of shoulders to get people here through the door. But it's really challenging, especially in the off season and the spring and fall when there's no one's up here to ski and no one's here for camping and fishing. There's nobody in Kirkwood. So unfortunately, the models of other departments, especially back east where they rely on all volunteers, we just don't have the labor pool to support that. And currently I only have 2 volunteers that actually live in the valley. I'm sorry, 3 volunteers that live in the valley year round. And of those 3, they all work for the KMPUD. So again, we've done everything we can to try to find volunteers, and we'll continue to ask people as well. So, but all good questions, and I appreciate you asking them.
Okay. I also just want to say thank you again to Rick.
Yeah.
Very good. Do you want to switch back to live for a bit and keep it balanced, or do you want to keep going with the online?
Let's just keep going with the online, and I would say let's do this, and then we can come back and say if anyone either place has any remaining. So let's just do that.
All right, the next one up is Larkspur. It's crazy that your name is the same as your street, but please unmute.
Hi. Building.
Can you hear me? Yes, this is Karen Boimer Browner at Larkspur. Thanks for taking my question. As I recall, a number of the calls that we get to the fire department are out of Valley. My question is related to that and other things as well, that I have looked online at fire departments across the state of California. I've been doing a little web searching, and a lot of them are having funding difficulties. One of the things that they are doing are increasingly going to subscription services and charging for fees, fees for services rendered. Has this been considered, given that this is, a thing that is more and more fire departments are doing? And if it has not been considered, why has it not been considered? And I'll let you answer. Thank you.
Thank
you. Fee for services, we do currently have a fee for service for fire recovery for calls that are outside the valley. So there is a way for us to try to do that. It's very difficult with volunteers who have limited skill sets and a limited amount of volunteers on calls to obtain the information required to be billable, but there is an option there. I'm not aware of other fire departments, and I'm certainly interested in finding out more from you about which departments are paying for benefits for services on an individual basis, unless it's a private fire department or company. I'm just not familiar with that.
All right, Alec Hogg, you're up. You unmute.
Rick, it's fast.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, well, thank you for the presentation today and all the work you've done on the assessments for the figuring out, do we need a fire department and how can we fund it? When I listened to the calculations, I came up with a different conclusion than a couple of the other callers. And what it made me think was I would make a recommendation that you send a very thorough review of how you do these calculations, the EDU calculations especially, and share that with the residents. And I recommend that really based on, the campaign last time, or the lack of campaign around how, that the fact that the fire department needs to be funded and how you've actually calculated those assessments. Last time, many people didn't understand how they were being assessed. So that was one of the reasons they said no, is from what I've heard. So in sum, I would ask, I don't need the calculation of my unit, but can you put out and communicate broadly a very detailed description of how the calculations were made, and then more examples than you've shown so far?
First, I'll say Chief Ansel is responding to a call that just came in. So for people here who heard the garage door open, it's because we had just had a call come in. So I don't know if he will go out, but we have people coming to the station. So sorry if the noise there. But in terms of that, is that with the engineer's report would go into more depth?
So the engineer's report is going to have basically the formula is the formula, and it's applicable to all parcels. There's only two formulas, one for residential, one for commercial. Once we have the engineer's report, and if it is adopted by the board, not only will it be published, but we will also have a portal on our website for people that have registered their accounts and have an online login, so you can actually log in and see your exact assessment. So that's how we'll be handling that. Meg Caldwell's the last one here. Meg, if you'll unmute.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. Really appreciate and want to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that you all have been devoting to this challenge and will be moving forward. At least I hope so. And I want to thank staff and the board for taking our critical need for a professional and fully paid fire department in Kirkwood so seriously. And I, for one, as an owner on Columbine Circle, am willing to pay more for this. It's worth it to me to have that kind of service. I support staff's recommendation to move forward with the study, and I also want to recognize that you've heard some really useful suggestions to help ensure that this study is credible and equitable and understandable to those who are ultimately going to render their own vote on this. So just want to applaud you again for your patience. You have answered so many of these questions multiple times for all the meetings that I've been part of.
Patient.
And you continue to do so professionally and patiently. Thanks so much, and appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Eric, are there any written questions
I've
that are
answered
left?
all of
Answered
them
all?
live.
Okay.
Either they've been answered live or I've typed the answer in.
Okay. Does anyone else have? Okay. We'll come back around. Okay. Let's go ahead. Maybe if we could start in the back with someone who hasn't asked. If you'd like to ask a question, we'll give priority to people who haven't already asked.
Some of you may know me. My name's Greg Hansen. Started working here in 1985. Been a homeowner since the early 90s. I'm a 33-year paid firefighter, fire captain. Worked for both CAL FIRE and Livermore Pleasanton Fire Department, where I retired. I think I can speak with a certain amount of experience, not so much in how we're going to fund our volunteer fire department, but basically what we could be potentially looking at having a $1.6 million fire department contracted to come in here. And basically, like soldiers, firefighters like to fight fire. They don't like to sit around training, which isn't going to happen. I've worked in extremely slow departments. I know what it's like to run no calls. I left the department when I retired, 10,000 calls a year, 100 to 120 calls a year for Kirkwood. That's probably, erring on the high side of calls. That could be the coffee pot that's left on the coffee maker, the burnt toast. Those are all alarm soundings. We might call them nuisance calls in the fire department. They count as a response. That's an amount of the calls. And that's not to downplay what's going on and what they're going to. The fact of the matter is we do have basically EMS. We have a doctor on staff, nurses, everything during ski season when there's people here, the population's here. I understand we need funding for the volunteer fire department. Rick does an outstanding job. You know, I know the three chiefs that were here prior to him, somehow they made things work. He's taken it a step further to get more training. I know we talked big things like, we'll send engines out of county, we'll make more money. Well, who's staffing these engines? Well, I have a problem with Amador coming in here is, it's gonna be a revolving door, just like it is for your volunteers. And just like Chief Winthrop said, when he did his presentation, where we have a hard time staffing because these guys get their tenure and they go work Sac Metro, which is what happens. It's stepping stone. This will be the same thing. You're gonna be paying 3 firefighters, which is essentially there's 3 shifts. You got 9 firefighters you're paying for. And my thoughts are it's gonna be like a farm league for a paid professional team. This is gonna end up being an overtime position for these guys to come in because they're gonna fill their busier stations with these guys when they need them, and they'll backfill these spots with overtime because it's easy money. They'll come in. So at 1.6, you're gonna see jack up. That might be the first year. And I came from Cal Fire. I know it's like 2-person staffing. I know it's like being underfunded. I know it's like relying on the volunteer departments. We speak to auto aid. There's auto aid and there's mutual aid. Mutual aid is when you call for the help. We need more help. Auto aid is like when someone calls 911, that's a structure response. We got the volunteers coming. We got Alpine County coming. If it's like something when Sun Meadows burned, it was a foundation save. Roads were closed. I was here. I took the photos that are in Chief Ansel's office. I've seen it. I've seen the last fire, every fire that's been here, I imagine, except the employee housing. And it's typically you want 3 fire engines minimum to start with on a structure fire. You need that. There's that many job assignments when you're there. So I guess where I'm going with all this is the fire service is expensive, period. It's a business. It's great for Amador County because they get to hire 9 more firefighters. So when they have vacancies, they've got a pool of them. And then these guys are like, hey, who wants to work at Kirkwood this week? We got some shifts open. I'll take it, $1,500 a day. I'm all over it, And I think that's going to be a problem, in all honesty. And I don't think it's a bad idea to really look more at the junior colleges in town. These guys that are aspiring firefighters, like the gentleman spoke earlier, they have to have a certain amount of hours of ride-along experience. Have them come out and work 24-hour tours, knock it out. You got Chief Ansel training. He's got his captains. Get them out. So those guys can bring things from the college as well. If we need to fund the volunteer department, I think that's where our focus should be, is getting more money on these guys and the recruitment versus bringing a full-on paid department in here. That's just my take on what I've done in the past. And I know there's a little bit of like fear, like, oh, what do we do without a department? And I can get into all that stuff too. You call 911, you got help coming. They don't just say, well, sorry, there is an auto aid agreement where there's other jurisdictions going to flow in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You want to talk about, is there anything in there that you want to comment on, Chief?
I got the kind of tail end of that, unfortunately. And just so you know, we have a LZ set up here at the clinic for the resort, and I've got 1 firefighter going to that call.
LZ
landing
zone for a medical helicopter. And this is a busy Friday ski resort day. And it just shows you what volunteer pool I have. That's just the only person that's available to go. If it wasn't an LZ call, I'd be gone. But to answer Greg's question, yeah, there'll be firefighters, 3 firefighters here. They would rotate in and out. It would be Amador Fire Protection District's problem to keep people up here. I know there's a turnover down there, but there's a turnover in all fire departments that are rural. They all want to work in the big cities, make more money, like he was saying. Absolutely right. And we just to circle on the very end, the junior colleges, unfortunately, we're not alone looking for good people. The local junior college, Lake Tahoe Community College, has a fire academy once a year. It's always full. There's always a waiting list to get in. Everybody at that academy gets farmed out to the local agencies in the basins, so Lake Valley, South Lake Tahoe, Fallen Leaf, North Star, or North Truckee. So they get kind of first dibs at these people. There might be a few leftovers that haven't found something just yet, and they're currently volunteering in Eastern Alpine County. But that's a very limited pool to draw from, and there's no other community college that offers a program near us. I wish we were in Santa Rosa or some of the bigger cities where you have a ton of people looking for work, but we're on an island, so it's a challenge.
I also want to touch on a couple of things I hit there too, because I mean, I think I heard this, which was if you call 911, someone is coming. I mean, that's not what I think I took away from Chief Withrow, at least from the Amador side, is that they do best effort to get here. And if the roads are closed, there will be no one coming to service us in that way. Is that my understanding that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I think that was one. And then also you mentioned, Greg, the clinic, which is available for like walking in, like if you had an emergency out here and someone could take you there, they might receive you. But we do not take people there as the KBFD. It's not a receiving hospital. And so that is just want to clarify that for people as well. Like that you have to take yourself there. If you're saying that that's a resource available, if you're not able to get someone to get you there, then that's not a resource for you in practical terms.
Could we put a fine point on that? KBFD will not transport someone from, say, the road or the parking lot to the clinic on Mountain. Is that correct? Is that what we just said?
The clinic is just that, a clinic, and it's not a receiving facility for KVFD. I'll make a caveat there. Last week we had a CPR in progress call in a parking lot, and I took him to the clinic because I knew there was a doctor there and they can do a lot more than I could as an EMT. But I broke protocol by doing that. I put my EMT license on the line by doing that.
Yeah.
So there are some discussions in the backgrounds about trying to make them more of a receiving facility, meaning that they could maybe split an arm or stitch you up and send you out the door without actually sending you to Barton, the facility that works basically the clinic. But those have not been completely ironed out just yet. And but for us right now, that's not we have to go through.
Thank you for clarifying.
And I do want to say, I mean, it's great that the resort has that available. And so let's recognize that as a resource. And I appreciate that they took that in. So I don't want to understate that value.
Yeah, it's also not a year-round facility.
Correct. It's ski days,
Not a
ski
day,
hours.
not a night round.
And I'll just
on that, you're actually, the Good Samaritan Act would actually protect you on that, your duty to act and helping that person out. You're not risking your license by that, by the way.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Craig.
All right. I see a hand up from our general manager of Kirkwood Mountain Resort, Ricky Newberry. So Ricky, I'll welcome you to unmute yourself and speak.
Hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Ricky. Go ahead.
All right, that's great. Yeah, I just wanted to add context. Appreciate that follow-up, Chief Ansel, and Greg Hansen as well. We did meet a year ago with Chief Ansel and Mountain County EMS to come up with a common sense memorandum of understanding to allow the Barton Ski Clinic as an advanced life support clinic to receive guests. So we full support for that if we can figure out how to make that happen. And that is between Chief Ansel and Mountain County's EMS and Barton Hospital.
Mountain County is South Lake. Can we clarify?
That's our EMS medical authority that dictates how things are done in the county. To make sure we follow state.
Okay, so it's California wide. No.
Mountain Counties is Alpine, El Dorado, Amador, and Calaveras. Mariposa.
I see. Thank
we
you.
have one of the board members sitting in the audience for that.
And we do have a meeting scheduled next week where that is an agenda item for follow-up on status. And yeah, it shouldn't take a year to come up with this basic approach. If we have board certified doctor and, like Chief Ansel said, a cardiac event in the parking lot, like let's get them to the higher level of care stat.
And I think just at a higher level too, just to remind everyone that we have no option. I mean, there's a comment before, we should have a follow-up volunteer fire chief available. That is not available right now. So the status quo, so if there are comments that came about the status quo should persist, that is not a reality that we have. And so I just want to make sure that is a comment that lands out there. I think we had a couple of people come back. Since the hands that I'm seeing up again are already people who have spoken, I will give you 30 seconds.
Bob
Come
Williams.
up to this podium, please.
Bob Williams, Glove Rock. Just propose that our consultants do a recharacterization of parking lots. They are now a money-making opportunity. 16 weekends at $40,000 per weekend is $640,000 a year. That's a conservative estimate. I'm looking at the number of cars right now. It's not just empty land. And any way we can do to get our $6.2 billion market cap corporation to contribute more to this operation would be beneficial and reduce the cost of the homeowners. So I think calling parking lots empty land is an incorrect characterization under the new regime. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Someone next. Thank you. And 30 seconds, please.
Okay, so first of all, the most serious fires here have been propane related. And there was only one that was fatal, and that was in Sun Meadows condominiums. So that just reinforces the point I was making about condominiums. In other words, I know people who lost their livelihood because of that. They had nothing to do with it, but they lost their livelihood because of a fire from a neighbor. So you're at much greater risk if you're in a condominium. And getting a 25% discount just strikes me as ludicrous. I would like to see a tax on propane. If propane is our greatest hazard, why aren't we taxing propane? We have electricity. We want people to electrify. What is wrong with taxing propane? Use that as a revenue source. That would be the most logical, environmentally sound way of helping to fund the fire department.
Yeah,
I don't care. You can scream me down if you want, Doug. Scream me down. The next thing, if you want the ski resort to pay its fair share, redo the electric rates, which was a case of the rich taxing and stealing from the poor and giving to the public to the ski resort. Okay? So property taxes, yes, use more of those. And I do have a question. Who pays for that 5%?
Thank you for your comments and questions.
5% would come out of property taxes.
That is property taxes, if I remember correctly. So the 5% general benefit is property taxes. Eric, I know this. We've heard that comment or request before about propane funding the fire department. Could you just speak to that? I think that's something that you mentioned before in the previous meeting.
Generally, rates that fall under the 218 process, you can't charge for something that's not related to the service provided. So I can't charge Doug to provide Peter with a senior discount for anything under 218.
You think he's eligible?
I think he's on the cusp. I think he's on the cusp. And Ed, feel free to chime in here too, because I know you've probably dealt with this as well. But so basically, if somebody's not related directly to the service provided, you can't add an ancillary charge on there. That's my understanding from district council and prior 218s that we've dealt with.
Okay. And now, do you have anything to add to that? In terms of costs?
Sorry, was that me?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, I was just going to agree. Yeah, when it comes to utility rates, that's exactly what Eric described. You can't exceed the cost of service, right? So for fees and charges, what we're doing and proposing today and presenting on today is an assessment, and that's what I was referencing a little earlier when I was talking about benefit to property. The special assessments cannot exceed benefit to property, but utility rates and all that, as Eric said, it just can't exceed cost of service, and it's got to be proportional across users and people throughout. So,
well, it's not directly the request. It is related to reducing subsidies on utilities to free up property tax in general. It's not real. It's not specific to propane, but we could do that.
100%. And I said this before, we had 2/3 of the community when we asked the question said they did not want to see their rates for other services go up by allocating more property taxes to to fund this effort for the fire department.
Yeah. So the background of that is we get a little over 900,000 property tax.
Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Yeah.
And the 1.2 for the fire department assumes 400,000 of the 900,000.
280. 280 is what's in the budget.
280,000 of the property tax of the 900 will go toward fire.
Right.
Just again, 900 is Amador and Alpine coming back to Kirkwood, nothing from El Dorado. And
No, we do get property tax in El Dorado. It's de minimis, but we do get it.
yeah, okay, and so only less than 300,000 is being subtracted from the 1.6. Is that what we were saying? Less than $300,000
So
would be.
the slide, there's a slide that has the budget that takes the offer value of, it's in the last page of this section of the board packet. It has the 1.5 and change, I believe, of the off the contract.
Page 47, Doug.
I want to go to 43. I'm gonna go ahead and guess 43 from my notes. What do you know?
So this is the breakdown. So there's a couple assumptions in here, how we got to the 1.2 million. So obviously a lot of things were deleted, the old assessment, the 501c3 donation, and then obviously no salaries and wages because it's a contract service. We assumed the G&A allocation would go from 8.3% to 2%. So that's a reduction there. And so then you can see this 280 at the bottom is what the board adopted in the most recent 5-year operating plan. And so the net is about 1.2.
So 280,000 out of the 900,000 plus that we get Kirkwood from counties, 280 of that 900 would go to this proposal or this model, leaving 600 something for utilities. And John, you make the point that could be altered. Doug makes the point that the community has said that's not what the majority wants.
Yeah,
But we can
and it's not directly related to propane either.
No, it's not propane, it's other services.
But it's related to.
And we have my understanding is it would be, as fiduciaries of this district, not good practice for us to spend every dollar towards this because of how we use the money for covering our RUS requirements and things like that. That would be that would cause other unintended consequences for rate designs elsewhere.
RUS is our debt obligations for the
5%
electrical project years ago, right?
We use it to cover the requirements there. So I don't want to get into depth. I don't want to get into a long story.
I think Alan has.
I know we have one more. I think we have one more question, but so I don't want to go into depths of Russ and all that stuff. That's it.
Just defining what it is.
Yep. Thank you.
Alan Sappian, 2 comments. The character of this valley changed dramatically after 2011 when a new ski operator came into the valley and took all of the middle management jobs away. So that's why Rick doesn't have a pool of young people to pull from it. I think one of the reasons the last 2018 election failed was because the community's perceived inequity on distributing this based solely on square footage and land value. One of the other ways that your consultant could allocate this to parcels is to look at the bigger picture, electric usage, propane usage, maximum occupancy. I mean, the gorilla in the valley is Vail Resort Company. I mean, they use about half the water, about half the electricity. We can't really calculate what happens on the Forest Service land, which they'll benefit from also. So I think if you were to use metrics that really reflect how much of the traffic and activity in this valley is driven by the resort company, you might get to a more equitable solution that you could get past.
Thank you.
I'll just address that really briefly. The peaking factor of 2.3 is based on electric and propane usage. That is how they determine the additional benefit received. So it is considered.
All right. So John, what did you have to say?
I almost forgot now.
Well,
the study is done to accurately calculate benefit received. I watched the whole process in Amador County last year, and it's kind of a crazy process. It's a hard thing to do. And while it's not impacting the calculation, also the votes go with the dollars. So Vail has a very very big vote in this.
Yeah.
Like north of 35% of the vote. So that's one thing to think about. That's just what I was thinking about when you're making your comments.
And I have a lot of things I want to say too. Is that the Forest Service land is included in that's not included. That's not. It cannot be assessed. That's not assessed because it's a federal process. So in terms of federal land, that's another part of it. Another thing I would just say, again, Measure E, you gave your ideas of why it failed. And I mentioned January 23rd meeting, a couple of other reasons. People were saying that they didn't like parking spaces, seasonality. The seasonality is being addressed in this, right? I mean, that's what the peak and off-peak factor was. We've hired a consultant who has an engineering report that has said this is standard practice to do these things. And the board is not coming up with this formula.
Well, we're not standard.
There's only so much we can do, though. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. So I would say but we hired the consultant. We took the community's feedback to do something that is legally defensible from an engineer's report. I mean, we took the feedback from Measure E to do this. So we are now talking about it, but I'm just saying that those are the reasons why we're here doing this conversation. Okay.
Close the public hearing.
I want to close the public portion of this, and so open it now to board conversation and questions and comments. Anyone on the board have any questions or comments they'd like to ask at this point? With a reminder that at the end, what we need to decide on is whether the board will move forward with what's proposed, adjustments proposed, or suggestions or whatever it might to look at in preparation for a final report, at which point we would then adopt the final version. Is that correct?
Consider adoption of it.
Consider adoption of the final version.
And that has spending implications to move next step, right?
We would decide that separately, I would imagine, right?
Yes, that adopting the report doesn't mean you have to immediately go out and ballot it.
Right. So we're going to decide on, is this the benefit assessment formulation that is correct? And then we can further, at some point in the future, decide whether we send it out to a ballot. It doesn't have to be in March.
What's the shelf life?
Do you want to respond? I'm guessing it's probably about a year. It's probably good.
Francisco Associates, right? It's a question for them.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say about a year. With that said, it says as comfortable as we feel with how current and accurate the data is, right? So the longer we make it sit, we let it sit, the more updates to the report there will need to be. But I would say, generally speaking, about a year.
Okay. Questions and comments from board members?
Well, I think it's a really tough situation to solve, because I think the comments about the call volume are real. I mean, it would be tough to have that lack of activity and keep the workforce engaged. I do think the Amador County outsource is the best solution we have, because they have more scale to do training, more scale to rotate personnel in and out of the valley, so they wouldn't be in a low call volume environment, 365 days a year. So I think that's positive. But it is hard to cost justify based on the call volume. I think Measure E, we got less than 30% of the vote last time. And basically the price tag on this is about the same. So while the allocation is different, we've shifted approximately 10% from commercial to residential. So it's a little more expensive for residential, a little less expensive for commercial. It's still fairly close, and the numbers is about the same. The 1.6 million is about the same. So I think it's going to be a tough thing to get passed. And the voting is very different this time than last time. A vote's not a vote like it was last time. This time it's a vote based on your assessment. So you got one very big, large vote out there that needs to be in favor of this. So without knowing the cost of going forward, that's kind of difficult. I guess if there's no cost and we sit on the report, then we could get the cost for continuing with an actual vote.
Yeah.
And maybe do some more work to try to ascertain if the vote's going to pass.
And that's what we've proposed in the roadmap as what the next steps would be, which is to see this through the engineering's report, put the assessments in front of, because again, why Measure E? People were concerned about not knowing what exactly the numbers were, right? So we have exact numbers. We will have literally a formula that says this is how much you are going to be assessed. Because again, that was another criticism of Measure E, which we are trying to remedy through this process. But the roadmap that we've outlined is that we would potentially, if approved here, as saying put together an engineering report, we would do this, put these numbers out in the community. We've talked about focus groups, which we can talk about next in the next agenda item in more detail in the roadmap of the community outreach, but that is the plan.
The last comment I have is we do need property tax to cover the Russ loan covenants, but we don't need that. We don't need over 600,000 to cover those covenants. So I've always thought that the use of property tax to subsidize utilities was kind of odd. And I think it's just historical. We got the property tax many, many years ago, and there really wasn't anything else to spend it on, right? So that's what it was used for. But I think it would be good practice to start using it toward a more normal usage like a fire department. I mean, property tax goes for schools and fire departments in general, right?
I'm not opposed to that. Again, I'll just say that our community survey suggested otherwise. And so but that doesn't mean we have to abide by exactly what a majority vote in a survey.
Well, I think the community voted, less than 30% voted for Measure E. So they kind of said they don't want to pay for
They don't wanna pay anything.
they don't want to pay for that.
I agree with you. I mean, and I guess that's a question that we'll have to ascertain as we continue to talk to the community is a 1.2 total bill assessed versus a 900,000 assessed going to make or break your vote.
Yeah, and it might not.
It might not, but it might. I think it's still on the table. I have not certainly decided one way or another on how we should fall on that, but I think it's open. Go ahead, Chris.
Question for John. So a vote is not a vote. Is it not true that the voting approach on this question in front of us today, if it were to go to the community, all homeowners vote, whereas Measure E, it was only Alpine County or Amador County registered voters who could vote on a ballot. So if that's true, there's a big difference. It's not
registered voters in the multiple counties last time. Last time it also required a supermajority, so it was a higher bar to pass, although we didn't threaten that.
But you couldn't vote. You could be a homeowner and you could be a PUD customer, but you couldn't vote on Measure E if you weren't registered to vote in one of those counties. So it's a very, very different voting pool. Here,
it's a different voting pool, but the voting counting is different.
But the counting is
counting is different too.
The thing that I think is more substantial is that your vote is weighted by your assessment.
Right.
And it's the majority of returned ballots, correct, Ed?
That's correct. A majority of returned ballots.
So it's not 100% of the allocated benefit is if only 2 customers, voted, whatever their proportionate values would be.
Right. But this is what led you, John, earlier to say Vail KMR is well north of 35 likely in their voting share. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, that's what they put in the slide deck, that 39% is commercial versus 61 residential. So you'd assume that is mostly we have more than one commercial customer, but you can imagine that is in that ballpark. So if you do the math, it could pass without the support of a commercial customers, but it would be.
And probably the other thing that was mentioned, which is just kind of a data point, not a pro or a con, but 218 is for fire. It's not for emergency medical. So it's like emergency medical is an ancillary service on top of fire. So if you try to reposition this as a 218 process for medical, it can't be applied using a 218. 218 is for fire services, not for medical services.
And yet there are proposals, requests from the community, letters, and I'd be interested in hearing Ricky Newberry's point of view.
In the next agenda item.
That basically ask, should there be an option, an altogether different option?
That's not on the agenda.
It's not on the
That's
agenda.
not what we're discussing.
We're discussing the
at
benefits.
this agenda item.
Yeah.
Okay, is it on the agenda? It's not anywhere on the agenda or not in this item.
not-
All right, well then let's at least be mindful that as we talk about this agenda item, what we are not considering. So, because there are other things we could consider.
Agreed. That's why I said at the
Yeah,
beginning.
like a paramedic ambulance solution that does not have fire, okay?
So, yeah, 218 is for fire.
Pardon?
218 is for fire, so
Right.
that's what this.
Exactly.
All right.
And I understand that.
All right.
Other questions?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah. Do you have
Okay,
other
yes,
questions?
I do. Am I to understand, I mean, I think it's straightforward, but all homes, all single family homes are created equal in this assessment. So irrespective of value or of the house or assessment, isn't it true that if I hear this right, all single family homes in Kirkwood have the same EDU count? They just differ in their land square footage.
That's correct. The land component is what would differ from single family home to single family home, but the building component, the $1,240 portion of the assessment would be the same.
Is it question? Is it true that home value can't be the primary driver behind benefit received? Like you couldn't just go to our tax bills and say, I'm going to charge based on the assessed value of your home.
Exactly right, board member. Prop 218 explicitly prohibits that. Assessments can't be directly correlated to home values. There has to be a benefit nexus and special benefit assigned.
Does that mean there's no workaround for the assessment to somehow create 2, 3, multiple classes of single family homes so that they would not all be treated equally? Maybe they should be, but I want to know if there's an option.
There could be, it depends on, how we look at it, but for the purposes of this analysis, what we did is when it comes to the structure and the single family home itself, we treated the building component equally. I would say that, having the 2 or 3 tax or the classification types within a single family home, usually a lot of times you'll see it more so on the special tax side of things. But this is an assessment, and
thank you. I don't want to be the only one asking questions. Are there others?
Well, I sent in a long list of questions, but I think they're not really good for public forum.
All right.
It's more to tune up the description of this engineering study when it's released in more detail.
Right. Could I ask Ed, your response, your thoughts on the questions we've heard from the floor on different assessment methodologies we might have done? It seems like one of the virtues I hear of the assessment we have chosen is that it's standard practice, which is good, but we've heard arguments that one might try or different non-standard approaches, and several were broached. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on taking another methodology with some of the things we heard from the floor.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely some good comments presented this afternoon. What I would say to that is I would definitely want to collaborate with Eric, your GM, and the fire chief. Take some of this feedback into consideration and see if there's any revisions or tweaks that we can make to the methodology. With that being said, we feel very confident about the methodology that's presented to the board and the public today. We feel that it's consistent, equitable, and defensible, but I'd be more than happy to consider some revisions, assuming your GM and the fire chief thought.
What were a couple of what other aspects or factors that you picked up or that you heard from the floor comments, the public comments?
Sure. Well, one of them was in relation to that residential housing parcel or property. Perhaps we need to take a closer look at that and maybe categorize it in a different way. But without looking at it further, I don't know the answer to that right now. But there's certain properties maybe on an individual basis that we need to take another dive into. The question about changing the CPI over to Sacramento versus San Francisco, in our experience, the indices are about the same. It's just every year, some are lower, some are higher. It depends on the year, right? But if for whatever reason it made more sense to do Sacramento, we could maybe do that. But I also understand, as I understand it today, San Francisco is what is being used in all your other fees and rates.
Got it.
So there's things like that.
Thank you. The 2.3 factor, which is I think the one method or lever that we use to consider use of energy, use of the house, that sort of thing. If you were somehow had to switch off the 2.3 to a 2.5 or a 2.1, in other words, higher or lower, making the levers stronger or weaker, which would you opt for?
It depends who you ask, right? I'm sure
you.
Well, the 2.3, I'll say the 2.3 is what the data shows today.
Just to be clear,
we went back 10 years. We went back 10 years. It's an average of 10 years. So it's not like we weren't looking at 1 year, we weren't looking at just post-COVID, we weren't looking at, pre-COVID. We have a good sample size. And the data today shows 2.3 on average over the course of the last 10 years. So, we feel good about the sample size and what the data is showing.
Goldilocks,
And
perfect.
just to be said another way, we can't reverse engineer this to punish or reward. That is not permissible nor legally defensible. This 2.3 is actual data reflected.
It's based on actual data reflected, exactly. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. My last question on this agenda item is if I could hear thoughts from you, Ed, on just I didn't pick up what led you to say a condo should be, I can't remember if it was 0.6 or 0.7, a duplex should be 0.6 or 0.7. What was the logic that set those numbers benchmarked off the 1.0 EDU of a single family home?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the land component is straightforward, just based on land area, and with the caveat that condos account for common area. So that's tacked on to whatever your building area is, right? So on the building component side, the EDU breakdown is based on standard service population figures by land use type. So a single family home on average, what is commonly used, very standard, is three people per household. And when it comes to condos, because generally speaking, they have less building square footage, livable building square footage, it's usually about 3/4 of that. So that's where the 0.75 comes in for condos, 0.75 that of a single family home.
What was the reason I didn't hear that last sentence?
It's based on average people per household is the correlation. Service population is the correlation there.
But we've said several times we're focused on property, not people. So why is that the metric?
Well, I guess it's both, right? So usually the service population is also a representation of of building square footage, of that kind of thing. So that's why a lot of times the ratio is service population based. But the correlation is, between building square footage, service population, the trend is the same, 75% for a condo versus a single family home. And then when it comes to apartments, so multifamily or duplexes, triplexes, that is usually about 2/3 as compared to a single family home. It's a little smaller, generally speaking, than a condo.
Okay, well, I guess I have a last question, and that would be, are you at all responsive or sympathetic to the argument that one type of home is standalone, it's a single family home, another is in a building? We heard arguments that if you're part of a big condo building, you're at risk because of your neighbor more so than if you have a single family home. How should the board think about that argument?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I would have to, discuss that further with your fire chief in terms of, how to best accurately answer that. But I don't know if maybe your fire chief wants to.
Okay. Do any of us, you, Rick, or any response to the argument? What do we think about that? I mean, maybe it's captured in the discount, the 0.6, 0.7, or I mean, if there's an argument that when you have a home, like many of us do, that is in a building of multiple homes, should you think about your fire risk differently than if you have a standalone home? And are we capturing whatever that result is? Are we capturing it?
I mean, fundamentally, does the home have a sprinkler or not?
Does it have a sprinkler?
That might be the way to measure. I could see applying between the two.
Okay.
I have a question about the if we change the 1.2 to another number, can this apportionment be accommodated? Or
yeah, that's just the proportionality doesn't change based on the total budget. So yes, we could put any number in.
So between now and an actual vote, it could change dramatically, like it could change.
Like AFPD could say we're not interested and we have to do the in-house model, for example. That would change it dramatically.
Okay, so we have that flexibility.
Yes,
To go down.
adopting the
To
study
go
has
down.
nothing to do with the budget, right, Ed, at all.
Yeah, I was looking, it can go down as well.
But when we go to vote, it will have to have the final number that we're allocating because we have to ask for that budget amount.
When we go to ballot the property owners, we will have to have a budgeted amount. For the engineer's report,
We do not.
we do not.
Exactly. So we can have, until we say 1.2 minus 300, 1.9 whatever, we that number is still up.
So that's flexible if we're gonna vote to move forward on, if we vote regarding moving forward on this. But the other factors like the 0.67, the EDU factors and things like that,
Correct.
those are not changeable.
Well, I mean, this is what I think we can motion for a vote on and have whether we go.
Well, I was just
forward with
asking, what's the flexibility between now and the vote, and the amount of the tax is flexible?
The amount of tax.
What else is, what's inflexible and flexible? Seems like the rest of the apportionment is not flexible at that point.
Right.
Okay.
We close public comments right now.
I
so-
would motion to proceed to get the final engineer's report. I would make that motion.
I call on Doug Mitter-Taronda to recuse himself from this vote. If he lives in a house that costs twice as much as mine, and he's gonna pay less than me. And same with the manager, okay? So let's get personal about it, okay?
No, I'll actually be professional and not a complete jerk. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyway,
Wow.
there's no
Where did
basis
that
for
come
that.
So anyway, that's my motion.
All right, we have a motion from Bob to.
I second the motion.
Okay.
I have a question. How much is
Any
it
further
gonna
discussion?
cost us to take this next step?
We've
To-
already
to finalize
budgeted for
the-
the engineer's report. If we want to make any changes that we're gonna talk about with Ed, that could result in a change order. I don't know yet. And then the balloting process. So really, it's just finishing the engineer's report, that final billing and the balloting process. There's not a lot of cost left.
Okay.
But we haven't decided to take it to ballot.
Right, but if we did, that.
We're
those
just
are your
getting
two
the
remaining
next
costs.
step, which is getting a final engineering report and being to the point where we could tell every property owner what their percentage would be.
But your question is, how much does the report cost, right? The next step. And so what is it?
I think
It's not significant.
What was our total budget, Ed? Was it around 60,000? I think, total contract amount.
Yeah, it was around, I want to say around 50. Eric, I'd have to look at the
It's a
contract.
total contract amount.
Correct.
We've already burned through a lot of that through with the work that's done today.
They have not billed us as of yet.
Okay.
But you probably should bill us for what you've done. so
That's
far.
okay. It's all right. And the 50,000 doesn't include the ballot.
50,000 did include the balloting, right, Ed?
It does, yeah. It includes, what it may not include is the postage, but it includes the production, the preparation and the production of the ballots and the ballot tabulation, which usually, we're up there and we assist in the ballot.
We have our own postage machine, so, and we can run all that through here, so.
Since we've had this, let's please back up on the motion and second, I was the second. And I will ask another question, and that is what is entailed, how much time, how much cost, and to consider options to this methodology that we've heard today. If we're voting now on yes, no on this methodology, and thereby closing out any adjustments or changes to the methodology, is it something that one could know within a month?
That's not what we're doing.
We're voting. We're voting on them considering the public comment.
Yes.
Oh,
Finishing the engineering report and presenting it.
Exactly.
That's,
So we
that's the
are-
motion.
This is not the final, thank you, Bob.
Not
This
the
is not the final
methodology.
decision.
Do you
This
still want a
is-
second?
do you
Yes,
still want
I
a second?
still want a second.
Okay.
Now,
And
emphasize,
ice cream.
community feedback, including all members of the community, should be considered when they put together this report on all of the aspects that were named in there, in which case the board will be able to vote on this in March for final benefit assessment. So I
did not understand that. I'm sorry.
We've had a community for an hour and 45 minutes discussing this. we are asking our consultant to consider the feedback. He even mentioned a bunch of them.
Good.
The ratios of condos versus whatnot.
Okay.
CPI, he's mentioned that he will consider this, and I will ask him directly now, please consider the feedback that you've been given today. And in our engineering report, please address the concerns and answer the questions that have been addressed today and provide your recommendations. As we heard comments, clarity of the calculations of all the
That's
things.
fine.
That is what we're doing.
As long as we're not.
We're not finalizing the benefit assessment today. We are finalizing them to go forward with some feedback.
Crystal
So,
clear.
do you still second it?
I already did, and I still again second the motion.
Fantastic. All in
Second
favor
time,
with a
second.
voice vote, please indicate with an aye.
Aye.
Aye. And I did not recuse myself, to be clear from the earlier comment. Any against? Okay, this passes unanimously. We're going to move on to agenda item 9B. Thank you, everyone.
So I want to thank Ed and Brandon for all of their
Yep.
time and the work that they put in. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And thank you to the community for the feedback here. Appreciate it very much.
And just before you all leave, there is agenda item 9B coming up, which is the community
Yes, we have.
community fire outreach, at which Ricky Newberry, General Manager of Vail, will be speaking and
Thank you
answering
for pointing
questions
that
from
out.
before.
And I
Thank
was
you.
going to say the same thing, but thank you, Eric. So I wanted to say, first of
That
all,
wasn't clear.
for folks who have provided comment today or not, I mean, I'm going to give a recap on, again, for 9B, we're talking about community outreach here. And if you've commented here, we did a community forum. I've spoken individually to many community members who've reached out to me, and I encourage people to reach out to me and communicate with me directly if they'd like. And I have had many phone calls in the last few months personally, and I imagine the board members here would do the same if community members want to do that.
Absolutely.
So I will start with that. I will, in terms of what's happened in the last few months, we're getting another call coming in.
Him and me, this.
That-
Just open 9B.
Yes, we're on 9B. Is there? Okay.
All right.
I'll catch up with you.
Yeah, so there is a car wreck.
Yep, I know. I just saw that come through. So we have another fire call that just came in, a car wreck on the highway, so we will deal with that. So 9B, we did a community forum in January 23rd, where Chief Ansel and I led a conversation around the challenges that we've addressed somewhat in the last agenda item. We had about 80 attendees and lots of community feedback in that session. Before that, we advertised on the community newsletter. We'll have another newsletter coming out after this board meeting, talking about what you just heard about the benefit assessment. And we've scheduled another community forum on February 20th at 6 p.m., where the focus of that conversation will be this benefits assessment formulation, where Rick and I will again host Q&A and answer questions. During the January 23rd community forum, we've received a number of questions asking Kirkwood Mountain Resort for their perspective on the KVFD in this process. We have sent those questions to the general manager of Kirkwood Mountain Resorts, Ricky Newberry, and he is here today. And I'm going to invite him to be able to talk about his perspective on all of this, more generally, of course, than what we talked about in agenda item 9A. So Ricky, thank you again for your time. I know it's a crazy operational time with all the snow, and we appreciate you for taking the time to join us today.
Appreciate all that, Doug, and thank you, board. Eric, are you going to continue to share your screen, or do you want to spotlight me?
Sure. I think what I'll do, let me promote you to a panelist, and then you can turn on your camera. So you just have to accept it, and then I'll stop the share.
And Ricky, I just have to say the skiing was great today.
Sacrifice of being a KMPUD board member was never greater.
So there you go. Oh, there you go.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, lots going on here today. Thanks, Doug. Nice to get some snow, some rain, and some more snow on top of that. And just calling out, it's been some challenging conditions for this week and some improved skiing, and got the whole mountain open today, which is great overall and really looking like a good Bluebird sunny weekend ahead. Just thanks for the opportunity to address some of the comments and questions raised regarding the emergency and fire services here in the Valley and Kirkwood Mountain Resort's contribution and support of this infrastructure. I do want to call out that we have been present in these discussions since they began. Dan Deemer, who's on the call as well, our base op senior manager, did work with Doug on the previous subcommittee. So I want to acknowledge that partnership and give gratitude for them working through that and then getting us to here. I did attend the December 2023 meeting that we hosted here in Red Cliffs, my first month in this role. Doug and I have met and will continue to meet. We were on the community forum Zoom, and I did try to provide comments there, but frustrating and weird technical issue. So thanks for the floor here today, the video spotlight, and glad you can hear me loud and clear. I agree that the current state of emergency and fire services in the Valley needs attention and new direction. I also agree with a strong majority of the survey respondents that the proposed plan perhaps is not the best solution and leaves potential solutions unexplored. As most of you know, I've dedicated over half my life and my career here at Kirkwood, starting as a ski patroller way back in the day when the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department was across the way in the lower shop. And my wife was a school teacher here. And I'd say as a father, a business leader, and a friend to many in this community, I care deeply about finding a solution that helps the needs of the people here in the Valley that share the love for this place. I believe as a resort, we do a really good job caring for our guests, from my experience and from their feedback, not breaking down Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department for calls unnecessarily, as we're fairly well self-contained. And I also do want to give a shout out to Chief Ansel to responding to the air ambulance that we just called and helping our security team secure that landing zone in Lower Red Cliffs. All right, here are a few things that we do worth noting. So Kirkwood Mountain Resort works closely with Barton Memorial Hospital to staff the ski clinic. I'll call out the only ski clinic still going in the region post-COVID. They staff it with a board-certified emergency room physician, a registered nurse, an x-ray tech, and an EMT clerk. And then we provide the space downstairs in Red Cliffs here and the appropriate equipment that they need. And this clinic is not restricted to just the ski area guests. It is open to the community. And this is something that I personally worked hard on in 2012 to bring back. As many of you may remember that we didn't have an ALS ski clinic for quite some time. So really proud that we do for our winter operation. I do also want to acknowledge that we did meet a year ago with Chief Ansel and Mountain County's EMS and Barton to figure out an MOU to allow the clinic to be a receiving agency as a common sense approach for a higher level of care here. I do also want to acknowledge that Kirkwood Mountain Resort has over 20 trained emergency medical technicians and 20 trained outdoor emergency care providers through our ski patrol team that we staff and train during the winter operating months when the vast majority of our guests are here. In addition to that, we have non-ski patrol hourly and salaried staff that do respond to calls on behalf of the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. While officially under the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department capacity when responding to calls, we remain highly supportive of our qualified team members safely abandoning their Kirkwood Mountain Resort roles to help with the need in the Valley. I will say, in summary, that we support our guest needs and are not the primary users of the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department services. I agree that this is a valuable discussion and we need to find a way to improve the emergency services in the Valley. I do not agree with the Amador County proposal. I don't think it offers the community and Kirkwood Mountain Resort with the right cost versus benefit solution. Kirkwood Mountain Resort, we're prepared to contribute to a plan that would identify and address these needs, work with our county representatives, and help find solutions to the challenges presented here, which include the absence of advanced life support, which is maintaining advanced airways and pain management, and a paid full-time fire chief with a robust volunteer program. Looking at the survey results provided, these needs are acknowledged and concerns shared by many, and there is a willingness to invest in EMS and more robust fire services, but not at the level proposed. I believe that we can work together to address these concerns and build a plan that closes these identified gaps. That's what I got. Thanks all. Look forward to keeping this conversation going.
Good. Thank you, Ricky. Appreciate you being here and thank you for giving some feedback to the community. We really appreciate it. And, it's appreciate the partnership, as you said, working with Dan starting in 2023 and the conversations we've had. And we will continue these conversations, of course. Thank you again for the partnership there.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the invite to the February 20th community forum too, and we can get into more detail there as well and share.
Yeah, but Ricky, I invited Ricky already to speak at the February 20th forum as well, just to make sure that people have lots of questions, and he's volunteered to be there as well. Okay, I'll open up a public forum just like we did last time. For up to 3 minutes, please, if you have a comment, and we'll go from there. All right. Okay, go ahead. Please stand up.
Just one question. Ricky, do you vote or does Broomfield vote when the ballot comes through if we proceed with this measure? Thank you.
That's a good question that I'll answer. We will vote as Kirkwood Mountain Resort. That's me.
Okay. Thanks, Ricky.
Wow.
Jeff has his hand up.
I just have one quick comment.
Please come up here so that the microphone's up here, so that I just make sure people can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. And again, it's just opinion, even going back to when I was a kid. I mean, when you had an emergency, it's really the best outcome you're going to have is how quick you make it to the receiving facility. It takes 45 minutes for an ambulance to get here. It takes 45 minutes to go back. The reason why they have an air ambulance come here, because they're traumatic accidents. And you have what they call the golden hour when there's a traumatic accident. From the time of the incident to the time of the hospital, it needs to be inside 1 hour, or the person starts to drop off substantially. And what Ricky spoke to was ALS. That's a big deal, having advanced life support. There's a little kind of false sense of security with just having EMTs. That's basic life support. That's CPR. Chief Renthrow basically talked to having advanced EMTs, which is a whole nother level of skills, almost paramedic level. You can intubate, start airways, provide epinephrine for jump starting hearts. You have a heart attack, you got a 1 in 10 chance of even surviving. So whether you're driving down to LA on Highway 5 and you need help, or you're up here, there's a level of risk you take. And that's an inherent risk with stepping out of your comfort zone of the city where all the municipalities are going to take care of you. And we all accept that as being adventurous and living here. So just that.
Can we clarify if it's advanced EMT and the Amador offer?
I will go back to what I remember from the video, which was it's basic life support with EMTs, fully trained EMTs, and there are conversations within the mountain counties to then allow for intubation and other things of more advanced services from EMTs. Is that your understanding as well?
KMPUD is exploring that option.
Correct. That is not set today.
Correct.
And that is, I would say, independent of this conversation. I think that's happening regardless of this. This is just in our area. Can EMTs do more given our ruralness? And that's so.
Yeah, thank you.
And as a side note to that, they don't have advanced EMTs with Amador County, according to Chief Windrow. So having the clinic here is really paramount for your survival. If you do have a catastrophic cardiac event, something of that nature, just something to take into consideration. And then getting to the hospital, receiving facility. So.
And Ricky, can you remember what are the hours that the clinic is staffed again, please, and the days of the year?
So we coordinate our operating schedule with Barton to be open every day that we're open for the season. This year, we obviously opened a week ahead of schedule. They weren't prepared to staff it. So we communicated that with Chief Ansel and local agencies that would be the case for us, that we'd be on our own. And then what we've worked closely with them on is for any isolation event where we have a road closure or forecasted road closure to keep staff and put them in lodging. So try to keep them kind of during that critical time when we know that help is far away.
Thanks, Ricky.
Yeah.
I see one Zoom hand.
Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm already unmuted. So first of all, again, thanks, and I appreciate the nature of your vote today. Just two quick reflections. One is, you're basically asking your consultant to take into consideration the various public comments, many of which are very good, but but how they're going to do that is really up to you. I mean, if you don't give them guidance as to how they're supposed to weight some of these things, like the benefits analysis versus some other analysis, you're going to not get anything back that's going to be useful. I just fear that from having seen these kinds of studies before, specifically with respect to the allocation. Secondly, I think I don't know if you've explored the idea of what it would cost to kind of keep the clinic open and have the advanced life support be a part of the clinic, and then separate out the fire. And the fire is one thing, and because right now you say the assessment's based on fire only, but there is this EMT component, and it's maybe not what we really all need anyway. So maybe kind of go back to the drawing board with Kirkwood on this and think about that piece, having advanced placement, life support. What will it cost to do that full time or as much as we need it, and fire separately? And maybe the benefit will be greater from those two than trying to put them together. That's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you for the comment. Appreciated and understood. Ricky, do you want to add something else there?
Yeah, I appreciate those comments as well. Again, having worked here since 1999, I've seen a number of iterations of what we can and can't do. We used to have summer operations with the bike park and events and things like that. Prior to Barton's current residency, we had a third party that ran the clinic, Dr. Anita Sandu Schwartz. Feel like she did a great job. Hired her staff, kept them around, worked with us in the summertime. Worked big events. So knowledge, acknowledging that history. Also, when we didn't have a clinic and I was exploring all the options for some ALS support, when I was ski patrolling and we were acquired and wanted to make sure that we had the resources that we need, I explored, ALS support through paramedics staffing the clinic. Looked at other rural clinics where there was a PA that had, this with a direct line to a doctor for orders. So I think there's just appreciating your comments, and there are other opportunities that I'm aware of and think we should pursue as a community.
All right. I'm seeing no other public comments, so close the public comment period and open it up for board discussion. Any other board discussion on community outreach? Just as a reminder, next steps that the board gave us at the last meeting was we'll have a community on February 20th, and then we would then have the March benefits assessment, and then if that were to get approved, we would be able to put with a number. So John, to your point, we can make up a number that is 1.2 or whatever, that's not set in stone, but we could say to people, this goes out. People would be able to log in, and Bob, you had brought up that concept of community forums. We talked about sending surveys, but that would be the idea. Obviously continuing dialogue with Ricky about their approach to this. That's the current plan.
I guess what are we going to use as a decision criteria for moving forward with the vote?
Yeah,
because it would appear that
EOA.
we would have a very difficult time getting this to pass. I mean, Ricky says he doesn't feel like it's the right approach, so there's 40% negative right out of the gate. So how do we close the gap on that? I'm not asking like it's your your problem only. It's everybody in the room's problem. It's like, how do we get it done? It's not going to get done this way, right?
I see it exactly as you describe it, and yet I think the plans we've had of a February forum should go forward. Community discussion. I don't quite know about focus groups, the merit of that, but it made sense last meeting. I suppose it still does. And developing other options will become very important soon. By other options, of course, I mean medical, paramedic, and so forth.
I just think there's two completely different questions. One is how to provide the best emergency medical coverage at the most cost effective. And the other is whether we're going to have a fire department or not. After experiencing Pacific Palisades, I know a lot of people lost homes there. If we if we have a summer and there's an activity that's starting and there's no fire department, we could end up with nothing here.
Yeah.
And so the idea that let's just not have a fire department because it's too expensive is something that's for me is the fundamental
will be
question.
two op-
We know, let me finish.
Of course, go ahead.
We know for a fact that we don't have enough people here in the summer to run a fire department. We've tried this for 8 years. I've been on the board for 12 years. Peter still holds the record. I'm only in second place. We have tried everything we can think of. There aren't enough people who live here to run a fire department the same way you could in other areas. In addition, as the chief mentioned, you want to have enough force so when they show up, they can actually do something. So it isn't enough to say, we have one person, we have a volunteer, Doug's available today, right? He's not authorized to drive the truck. So what we have right now is nothing that can actually deal with a fire. We have a volunteer fire department in Alpine County that will do the best job they can show up. We have a larger thing in Amador County, and we have wildfires. Anyone remember Caldor? All those things are possible. We could wipe out the community in one summer. That's the thing we have to deal with. Yes, we can improve EMS, but the fundamental question is, do we want to roll the dice on fire, or do we want to have the ability to actually respond?
What the market is telling us is that, yes, we do want to roll the dice. That's not my opinion. It's what we're hearing loud and clear. By rolling the dice, I mean, the only way that we're going to get to a fire solution is if we integrate it with a medical solution. And so it's abundantly clear that a fire-only solution, it failed with Measure E. It's, as John said, out of the gate, not looking promising now. And so I don't see any way that we're going to, that we can be optimistic on this without a new approach that is maybe even bigger than 1 point. I mean, obviously it's going to be bigger than 1.6 if it includes medical, because you're not going to get support of the biggest voter.
Okay. Well, then this isn't, I mean, while we are different, Kirkwood is a very unique environment. The whole country's short on both full-time firefighters and volunteers. 7 of 10 firefighters in the US are volunteers. So there's a large volunteer base, but they're all short. And so those are just facts and figures just from, some research. But then also my son-in-law is a volunteer fireman in Santa Cruz County, and they're short. They're always short-staffed. And that's a major metropolitan area. So we are unique, but we're also in a macro trend that's going in the wrong direction.
So what I would like to say is we have an agenda item 15 where we can have more general board discussion on future agenda topics. What I want to know is from the board, is it okay to move forward, or should we move forward as currently planned, at least through the next board meeting? And if that's okay, then I would like that to just be the guidance that we give and move on to the next agenda item, or next agenda item, I should say.
Yeah. There's the event. Can you say the event? There's an event coming up in
February 20th. The plan was to go over, at 6 p.m. so people can, maybe on a different time, just go over some of this. Again, Ricky is invited and he said he will attend, and, I'm sure give some comments relative to what he just gave to in this.
What about, is there a campaign with the HOA?
I've reached out to every HOA president specifically and spoken to many of them one-on-one. So I am working with them directly. The focus groups would be what I would imagine the continuation of that.
So I was thinking if you want more help with that, as far as getting in front of the HOAs or the HOA boards and then requesting that they talk to their members and give us a response with indication of go forward or don't.
Yep.
That's a message back to us. It's also a message back to the resort.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I'm hearing proceed, and we, appreciate that offer to help, and we can talk about that more. Okay. If you have comments, I will welcome them from an email in the future, please.
It's not even a question, it's a comment.
Right, yeah. All right, comments you can send to info@kmpd.com or to me directly on dmitterton@kmpd.com. I just want to make sure that I'm respectful of our process, and I appreciate it, but I want to make sure we're moving forward. We have lots of things on the agenda still, and it's 4:10. All right. Thank you, everyone who came for KVFD conversations. Appreciate everyone's comments. Again, info@kmpd.com or dmitterton@kmpd.com. You can reach me directly, and we'll make sure that your comments are. Chief. We're gonna give it a second here for your calming.
I'll just say one thing off the record, as far as if there was another caliber fire, it doesn't matter what fire department we have, you're not putting it out until the weather cooperates. Either it runs out of fuel, now it's the whole Palisades. It started where the fire hit the ground. You don't put those fires out till the weather changes, the wind stops, or it runs out of fuel. Those are major conflagrations. There's no stopping them. I've been to a lot of them. I've seen seaweed burn at the coast.
That's good. All right, we're on agenda item.
Thanks for your comments.
9C, page 44, I think, of the packet, Eric. You're already beat me there. Thank you very much.
Upgrade. It's an option.
It was there.
That I wanted. Yeah. People consider rather than removing more.
East Meadows was
Go ahead.
surprised.
Good afternoon.
Thanks, Jared.
We wore them out. You're gonna have a decent time.
All right, so we're looking at the overview and budget variances for our November financials. Nothing has changed since our finance committee. So if you have any questions on the overview?
You've got $23,000 of equipment sold at auction. What did we sell?
So we had a couple old tracklesses. We had our old fire engine
Yes.
and
Barbecue.
Couple
The
vehicles.
trackless that we had completely cannibalized that
Okay.
was just the husk. And then I think it was T1 that we started cannibalizing. So we only sold one trackless. We're now cannibalizing T1, like we cannibalized the other one. The barbecue,
expedition.
there were two old vehicles and then the fire truck. Those were the big ticket
We
items.
still have the chippers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Chipper singular. Yes.
Oh, singular.
We only ever had one.
We still have the one that gets mounted on the front of a.
No, that one's been gone for a long
Okay.
time. That's been gone for almost
All right.
5-6 years. But we have the new one that we bought with the 501c3 money.
All right.
Any other questions? Okay, so let's move down to the balance sheet. So November, total.
I just have one suggestion. By accident, I got the finance packet. I'm not on the finance committee
I have
anymore.
this on agenda item 15.
And that was really helpful. So I think it'd be really good that when you have finance packet, just send it to all the
Everyone.
board members, because then we can review them.
Carrie has acknowledged that and she
Yeah.
will take care of it.
I was already going to bring this up in agenda item 15. That's not just for finance, but for all committees.
Ooh.
And if board members do not want that email, they can opt out, but
Or
that would be.
they can delete it.
Or they can delete it.
You want to do that for the first
You can delete email?
No, every
All
committee's
committee
packet,
packets to all board members.
we send notifications to all board members, but send all packets to board members as well.
This one feels.
So when we get rate studies or things like that.
Delete it if it's-
Anyway, this was on agenda item 15 that I was gonna bring this up, so I'd like to keep on our agenda topic here. Thank you.
All right, okay. On the balance sheet, for November, total operating, was below budget and total capital reserve was higher. Nothing else has changed since our finance meeting. Any questions on balance sheet? Okay, move down to combined income statement. Again, operations and maintenance were higher than budget. That was due to the CSB and Powerhouse paving, along with, in wastewater, we had the VFD replacement and grit removal. Any questions?
Yeah, and those are gonna carry through the whole year, so we're gonna see those as budget variances all year long.
Yes. Okay. The individual income statements, any questions on those? Again, the wastewater fund was worse than budget due to the VFD replacement and grit removal. And next down to the December preliminary income statement for November, for December, sorry. Our operating revenues for year to date were better than budget. Any questions?
These are easy.
All right.
I told you, we wore them out.
All right, let's move on to cash
All
flow.
part of the plan.
For December, again, no changes since our finance meeting. We did make a rest payment.
The only thing I would note is we finally got the LAIF paperwork updated. It was a Herculean effort to update it. It was basically, it only had Peter on it as the only signatory that was left because they did it by name, not by position. So we submitted new paperwork with them. We switched. They still had our BMO bank. So as of this week, I transferred almost all the money from LAIF to 5-Star because we get paid interest monthly instead of quarterly. So that has been done. So you'll see a variance in cash flow starting next month, but that is why. And we talked about that in finance briefly, that we were going to do that. So.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Any questions?
That was easy.
All right,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Have a safe drive home. You get to get out of here.
All right, move on to 9D, page 62 of the packet. This is the expense reimbursement policy. So Eric, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, so 2019, we updated our expense reimbursement policy. In the 5 years subsequent to that. CPI has adjusted approximately 20%. As we're training more staff, we're recommending, and Finance Committee agrees, that we adjust the reimbursements as shown in the policy. So happy to answer any questions on those.
Yeah, we looked at it, seemed reasonable.
I just did an attempt at humor. Which CPI local are you using? Because
Say
San
what
Francisco- I tend to think inflation affects everywhere. So I didn't
it's pretty
follow that.
consistent between cities. Yeah.
Okay, we need a vote to approve this.
Oh, motion to approve?
Is there a second?
All right, second.
Okay, all in favor indicate with aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No one opposed. Thank you. All right, let's move on to agenda item 9E. This is the post-audit recommendations, page 66. John, this is you.
Yeah, getting there. Want to see what I said? Now, the last 2 years, we had an audit, subset of the finance committee met with the auditors independently. It's a really good process, I think. And so is Jack Longanati, Standish O'Grady.
Right, maybe.
Bob, you met, yeah, although you're transitioning out. And if you look at the audit, there's more journal adjustments that we'd like to see, so they create risk factors in the audit. On the other hand, when you look at the characterization of the journal entries, their timing of expenses, they're not missing expenses, or it's the timing of journal entries. So that's not as alarming to myself or the rest of them, the auditors or the audit, little sub-audit committee, the finance committee. So, but we'd like to clean them up. So Moss Adams recommended that we have a more extensive use of an accounting consultant that they recommended. But we also need to let Eric judge, what value are they able to provide, and look at the cost of that as well and balance that, right? And so we're going to continue that. We also would like to see if they could help with the next RUS loan when we convert the construction loan to RUS for the wastewater treatment plant. If they can help smooth that process, that's available to be used as well. But again, I think we need Eric to say, hey, is it really going to add benefit, and what's the cost of that? The final one is a directive, which is to provide a management letter. So it's very odd that Moss Adams would send us an audit and they wouldn't send the letter along with it. And then we'd get a PowerPoint later that would say what all the journal entries were and what the problems were. So I wouldn't get much lead time to look at that. The finance committee wouldn't. And then you guys didn't get anything until the board meeting. And from my experience, that's the first thing I go to when I look at an audit, like, go show me all the problems, right? So going forward, they're gonna produce a management letter and send that out with the audit report, and we'll get that well in advance of the board meeting. Anything I missed?
Just the only thing I would say is, so we talked to Ryland about, what it would be to help with month end closing. So they said 10 to 20 hours, and then to help on the back end with the audit. I didn't ask about RUS, but to help on the back end with the audit was about 40 hours. So monthly, you're looking at about a $4,300 expense if we want to use Ryland to help with month end closings.
Yeah, so what I thought might make sense is try to get benefit out of it. If you're getting benefit, you could do more. If not, you could curtail it and save us the $4,300.
Yeah.
Do you want to authorize a certain number of months or leave us like, is the
Well,
recommendation?
we meet monthly, so we can talk about it monthly.
Okay.
Agree to, if we want to keep it going. And then on the RUS, I think that was that'll just be a good learning curve for, just going through the process.
Sure.
I think it'll help a lot. It'll clean up a lot of things in the future, understanding the process. So
Yeah. It's like where we put interest right now for CoBank is not where I would have thought we would have put it, which would have been under the work in progress for wastewater. They wanted it in its own separate. Moss Adams did. So things like that.
Yeah.
But yes, I will, we'll try them out. I mean, Terry's been reaching out and she's had questions intermittently to Matt over at Ryland. So.
Yeah, and then I think Terry's kind of chewing through the learning curve, and I think going through the RUS process will be going through that process will make it easier with dealing with RUS issues ongoing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I would think we need a motion to do this, to recommend this.
Since it's not included in the budget, I'd feel more comfortable having a motion to.
Motion to approve the audit recommendations.
And the associated.
So we're hiring a consultant. This consultant, Ryland, is a.
We already
hired them.
We
This is
approved that
authorized them to
last,
continue.
we approved that last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this would be to authorize, the number of hours that Eric has.
Just say up to 75,000, which would cover 6 months of month end closing plus audit.
Okay, so John, would you like to make that motion?
Yeah. Motion to approve audit committee recommendations, including expenses not to exceed $75,000.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Chris. All in favor, indicate with an eye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No one's opposed. All right, thank you. Thanks to Finance for taking this on and giving us recommendations. Appreciate it very much. All right, now we're on to item F, page 67. Brandy. Performance reporting and aquifer levels.
All right. If we take a look at performance reporting for the month of December, you'll note in electric that probably the most notable thing here is that our actual metered was a little lower than our budgeted metered for the month. It was a quiet month up here. We have no snowmaking to be spoken of, and we just saw a little less than expected there. For propane, thing to note here is that we see our reversal of the large loss last month. Last month, we had a 25% loss. This month is negative 27%. I did take a look at the timing of deliveries, and we had 2 deliveries within the last 2 days of both November and December, and those can drastically change our losses and gains there. As far as water goes, we produced 1.94 million gallons at the wells. We saw a 21% loss there. That is, as you see, it does fluctuate a bit. It's a little higher than we'd like to see. Probably we can attribute that to tank levels. And something that staff is looking at right now is a different tank level sensor setup so that we'll be able to track those more accurately. And hopefully we'll be able to smooth that out a bit.
I was catching up with my own notes. So is that the 611,000 unmetered propane that you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So propane, I feel very confident in saying that's a function of when we got the deliveries.
Okay.
At the end of the months of November and December. And then lastly, for wastewater, our influent meter at the plant showed 1.7 million gallons coming in. Unidentified unmetered usage was at 16%, which is not unusual this time of year. We will be curious to see what the recent warm weather and precipitation does for us in the upcoming months. And then included in your packet also, we have aquifer levels for well 4-5. We have the overview sheets for each of the utilities and temperature. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Brandy? Okay. All right, so move on to agenda item 9G. This is the propane master plan. Brandy, I think this is also you.
Absolutely. So we finished the propane master plan. Stan Tech was able to assist us with that. And they came back with this report, which was reviewed by Ops.
Yes, we'll call it engineering operations and planning going forward.
EOP committee, thank you. I was going to forget that. We in the general summary here is that our infrastructure overall is in good shape. We do have the proposal in here, an engineer's estimate for a couple of canopy options over parts of the tank and the valving, tanks and valving, and the vaporizer area. And so those are included here in the master plan. And then if you take a look at section 4. Okay, thank you. One of the comments from committee was the service line replacement that we had talked about doing wasn't in the capital improvement plan here in our master plan. So they did update that and put in an estimate for the service line replacement. So you see here these phase 1 canopy, that is a small area over the most critical parts of the bulk tank area. The phase 2 canopy is a slight addition to that, and we're very happy with the way they phased it so that potentially we can all move forward slowly, improving the area. And then the vaporizer area canopy, which is something that we really want to look at closely to improve safety and protection of our equipment over there. All in 2025, along with a new third vaporizer. So the vaporizers that we have out there to change the propane from liquid to gas and get it out into our system are getting relatively close to the end of their service life. They've been very good for us, very low maintenance. We're very happy with them. But the idea presented here is that we would add a third to add additional redundancy. And then as we reach end of useful life, we would retire the oldest of the existing so that we're never in a position where we're down to a single vaporizer for a whole winter. That would be less than ideal. So all of these improvements were discussed. Staff is on board with all of these. I would be happy to answer any questions or points of discussion.
Yeah, I just there's a typo on page II that replace is supposed to be replaced. And then I understood it, I figured it out by looking at the capital plan, but the paragraph on II that talks about adding the third storage tank could have been worded better. It doesn't really, until you look at the capital plan, you can't figure out if we're gonna have 2 or 3. So you can just clean up the language on that, it'd probably work. It is buying 3 over time.
Vaporizers, not tanks, to be clear, because tanks was a very different conversation.
I know. I'm still thinking about tanks. No tanks, 3 vaporizers.
No third tank and a third vaporizer.
Yeah.
So the third vaporizer is just in backup in an emergency for one of the 2 existing tanks, right?
Vaporizers.
Yeah.
So
I got used to it.
in heavy usage periods right now, we use both of them at the same time. So normal usage,
Right.
shoulder season, we
I
only
get
use
that.
one, but this would be adding a third so that we get some more redundancy.
It's not redundancy solely, it's that the stuff that we have has an end of life usefulness, but this is a strategy to give redundancy while we can elongate the life.
That is correct.
Okay. I thought this was great. I thought it was a really good study. I really appreciated the comments and the dialogue in here, and it seems to make a lot of sense to me.
And
So
the photograph.
photographs are great. We need a motion to accept this report?
I think that'd be good because once that's done, then I can start on the propane rate
Rate
study
study.
utilizing
Yeah,
this.
right, which
And
will
this
then-
was reviewed at
EOP.
EOP. We asked questions, and I think it's a really good idea. It's a set of very good ideas.
And I will also comment that this is the first propane master plan that we have done as a district.
It's the first master plan we've done as a district.
Bob, could I ask you to
Of
elaborate?
anything.
It's a set of good ideas. I read the report. What are the good ideas that
Well, I
stand out?
think minimizing the cost of the roofs and then adding a third and then retiring as opposed to waiting for one to go out.
Yeah.
I think it's a prudent use of money and redundancy that we will appreciate if we ever need it.
Thank you.
All right, I just like the motion to adopt this master plan with the caveats that John had put us for edits.
And Bob, I'll second.
Well, I would accept a motion to do
Oh,
that.
I thought you made the
No, I said I would accept a motion to do that. Someone motion to do that?
Yeah, I moved that.
All right, Peter motions. Is there a second?
Bob seconds.
All in favor indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And no one's opposed. Thank you.
We're an agreeable group.
All right, we'll move on to 9H, water wastewater rate study. This
Thanks,
is
Brandy.
page 113. And thank you, Brandy. So Eric, this is your topic on 9H.
Yes, so as we're getting ready to do the rate study, as I'm soon to get the water master plan, there's just some high level policy decisions for the board to make relative to the previous rate study. And assuming nothing's changed, so probably, unless I'll go through them one by one and just kind of see where consensus lies, and then either we can do them all as a one shot or not, but so in the prior rate study, we followed our policy 695, which sets our operating reserve at 25% of annual expenses. Do we want to do that in the new rate study? Staff recommends we do. Everybody.
How about we do this? Why don't we do this with the consent agenda? And then
Okay.
I can
Anybody
say,
can pull anything?
anything anyone wants to pull forward as
Sure.
conversation, we
Sounds
pull forward
good.
as conversation.
Number two is basically arguably the same thing. It's capital reserve instead of operating reserve. Again, 25% of the cash needed for the 5-year expenditures. We again recommend the rate study be designed following policy 695. The third is we assume no new connections in the 5-year study that we did previously, although we've seen some recent growth, and in the budget assumptions adopted by the board last June, we assumed a 1% growth, so I'd recommend we use the 1% growth in the study to be consistent with the budget assumptions adopted by the board.
Where are you seeing growth?
We have,
We have 8
Brandy, 6 houses under construction. We have both the Sentinel West triplexes. So, and I don't know what's happening with Timber Creek Mobile Home Park, but yeah, so we've been seeing growth. Yeah, no, I mean, there's, Brandy, tell me on this. There's 1 KMA.
1 in progress, 1 proposed.
And 4 in East Meadows.
Okay.
I think that's right.
These are reserves for water, wastewater, or both,
This is water, wastewater.
both combined.
Correct. Yeah, the study is combined. Yeah.
I'm looking at old notes. I don't know if this is true, but weren't reserves for water as low as $100,000 and going to almost zero maybe in our annual financials? I guess really what the question is, what is the state of our reserves today for water and wastewater? I know with wastewater, they were almost $2 million, but that's obviously connected to the big project. How are reserves?
I can get back to you on that, but wastewater reserves are roughly around 400,000 or 500,000 right now. Wastewater, and I think water reserves are around 90,000. But if you look at the capital plan for the 5 years, we didn't have a lot of projects, so 25% it was covering. So we were meeting that.
So this proposal is to keep it a little bit more, but 110,000 reserves, but that's.
No, it's to keep it at 25% of expenses. There's no 110,000 mentioned that I recall anywhere.
Or A, but I probably have the wrong.
Oh, that's property taxes? You're looking at the wrong one.
Excuse me.
We're on the, that's
So-
property tax allocation.
So jumping to that, So the 2020 study assumed we'd use 93,000 in property taxes. The budget assumptions that were adopted by, or sorry, the operating budget that was adopted by the board used the number of 110. So we recommend that we stick with that. So that's.
So yeah, so I'd like us to have a discussion either today or some other time about.
Today's the day.
Okay. Property tax
Okay,
allocation.
do we need that 93?
Meaning, where we have hard needs, like if we need it to be a backstop for us with RUS covenants. I think that's a hard requirement that we need to protect. With regards to subsidizing utilities and then having an ongoing shortage for fire department, and the normal usage of property taxes, schools and fire departments across the state, should we consider reducing or eliminating the property taxes or do that over time for these utilities?
I guess I'd like to look at what the implications are at a couple of different points. So my request would just be to look at, just do a little bit of modeling and say, what would it mean?
But
To
if we,
consider lower amounts.
yeah, I'd rather go in with a argument that we consider that while we're doing the rate study, so we could say.
Yeah, right,
okay,
that's
okay,
what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean,
Yeah.
so we have water at 110 and wastewater at 250. Can you give me the pressure points you would like explored?
Well, do you think there'll be any RUS covenants on with WWTP?
No. No,
So-
electric's completely
So
different.
the pure use of the property tax and it's just reduced.
It's subsidizing rates.
Yeah, it's just subsidizing.
Is it a linear math? Like if you just put it to zero, is it a linear extrapolation or is there a nonlinear component that we'd have to
No, there's a
consider?
nonlinear component because base rates are different than commodity rates are different than meter rates. There's three
Yeah.
components in there, and yes, two of those would be linear.
Okay.
One is not because it's.
I guess what I'd like to see is to see it, see a model of that and then see how harsh of a change it is on customers and then discuss.
Like a 0, 50% and 100%.
Yeah, that's what I-
Would that be okay?
Sure, yeah.
I just don't want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want it infinite. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
do that.
Yeah, that's
So
what I
that
was
applies
thinking.
to 4A and 5.
That's 4 and 5, right?
Okay, still skipping to 6 then, since we just did 4 and 5 together. This is the CPI discussion. I did look up on my phone just really quickly, and Sacramento versus San Francisco is not much different. But what is, and it differs from year to year, and I think, John, you said this, but the relative change from year to year in Sacramento is basically the same as the relative change from year to year in San Francisco. So they go from June to June, and that's what we use. Well, by proposing we use April to April, but anyway, basically, so board can pick whichever one they want. It doesn't really matter a hill of beans. It's going to be the same results.
I think it'd be worth it. That's what I was going to, just to get back to Bob on.
Sure.
Is there a material difference?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we recommend using 3.5% in the rate study. Obviously, we use the actual number.
Right.
We don't have any better data. There's no better number to pick I can think of.
No. Yeah, that's just what I looked at for the last, 5 years. So.
Yeah.
And do you want me to switch to Sacramento? It doesn't matter.
Unless there's a good rationale for it.
I just want
I'd
to.
rather have the consistency across what we do.
Yeah, I just want to verify that it's not a material difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not.
It looks like Terry already knows it's not.
I know it's not.
Oh, okay.
All right, 7, we assumed a minimum debt service coverage of 1.5. We recommend that. Again, we stick with that.
Yeah.
Although we're not anticipating significant debt relative to water. Wastewater, a little bit more, but not very much since we have pretty good reserves built up from the last rate study. Shall the rate study include any assumption of new debt? I don't believe so. I don't believe there's anything in the 5-year plan. We have consistent projects in wastewater. We have intermittent projects in water, but none of them are extraordinarily large. This could always be revisited in the future, but I don't
Yeah, I
think we
agree.
need to assume any new debt. I don't have a huge project on the horizon, at least that I'm aware of.
And this includes the refurbishing debt already.
That's, yeah, no. So if you look at the bottom, the wastewater, the very last sentence, the wastewater debt, by the adoption of the rate study, wastewater treatment plant will be existing debt, not new debt. We should have a known number by the time it's adopted.
Yeah.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay. The 2020 rate study set the base rate for irrigation at a third of the base rate for residential. One, should we continue this? And staff says we should, and we should also add the Timber Creek snowmaking meter, which the board previously defined in the same, 1/3 4-month window, even though it's not during summer. Included in the discussion of the irrigation meters, include the Timber Creek snowmaking, since it's already being treated as an irrigation.
Right.
Any changes? And do you want to make any changes to the cost allocation percentages from the 2020 study? Those were pretty well hammered over. And
Right, I agree.
What are the cost of, that's not SG&A, is it?
It's in the packet from last. So if you wanted to look at it and how it goes, there's a lot of components to it. But it's what goes into base rate and what goes into the commodity rate, and how much of labor goes into base or how much goes into commodity, and and the meter is pretty much just meter replacement is all that's in there. So, but it's just to give you, if someone has the page, just so I could help.
That's fine, thank you.
It's probably 20 pages after this page, after 114, Chris. So, but I'm happy to go over it with you need to. And then do we want to make any changes to the definitions of EDU? Recommend no changes. We've finally switched over to industry standard when we did this 5 years ago. And no reason to go back to a one-off.
I have a number 12 that I'd like to suggest.
Okay. Well, is everybody on board with 1 through 11?
So 1 through 11, I have notes that 4 and 5, we're gonna have some
0, 50, 100.
0, 50, 100, and so number 6, there'll be some analysis of any material differences of CPIs.
Yep.
Other than that, is there anyone who has any other notes on 1 through 11?
No.
Okay, we have a motion to accept those with the amendments that I just outlined.
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Okay, all in favor indicate with the eye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Number 12.
This is a little bit of a technicality, but what we really care is the total amount of base rate collected. But what we currently do is we tie those numbers to what the value of an EDU is.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, in a year where we don't have a lot of usage, then the average homeowner drops, and you end up with more EDUs and you collect more money. And then if the next year, if you have a high usage, the number of EDUs drops.
No, that's only true about commercial. It's not
Right.
true because residential is always 1.
Yeah, that's true.
So residential is 1. The only thing that changes is the commercial
That's
EDUs.
Correct, right.
Um,
So my suggestion would be is that we budget the total base rate,
mhm.
and then we solve for what the EDU is. Otherwise,
You're
we
talking
take-
commercial only?
Well, commercial is the only one that changes because all homeowners have an EDU of 1. I just did an experiment. It's a 10% difference. I just looked at the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just
I
weird.
no, I definitely know it's true. I mean,
Yeah.
calculate, I know it's 230 now, I think, right? And
Yeah, 23, 24 is 100. This year so far, if you closed, it would be 81.
right.
So it makes more sense to budget a total base dollar amount collected. And then to solve for what the EDU is.
But then, I mean, and I guess it would impact residential if you had more EDUs come online.
Yeah.
Well, no, yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to, and this is more common than what we do. If you wanted to go back 10 years, pick your number, I don't care. we could solve for what an EDU is, an average EDU is over 10 years, and set that as a hard and fast number and not adjust it every year
In terms of usage or dollars?
in terms of usage.
And that would solve,
And
that would solve the problem the same way.
Yeah. And
It's
then
just the usage, the EDUs being recalculated every year causes
yes,
this anomaly.
and most places don't do that. But we were transitioning slowly in 2020 when we did this to the norm. So
Okay.
From a staff perspective,
Uh-huh.
and the recalculation and report sort of, I would fully support pick your time frame and setting an EDU in Kirkwood as blah.
Okay, and that's what we did for electric.
Electric doesn't
It's
say that.
130 for 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe
So,
smooth it out instead of making it so.
yeah, I would go
Yeah.
for that. So, yeah, that would be fine. These just say the EDU is the average for residential for the last 5 years.
5 years.
And then that stays.
So it goes with the rate study. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then that would, right.
Does everyone understand this and we're gonna vote on this one as well? Does this make sense?
Does the EDU logic pertain just as much to other utilities or really just water waste?
It's in every utility.
Well, I know it is, but your point, this point in number 12 would pertain to that would affect all utilities, right?
We're only discussing a rate study for water and
I
wastewater.
know, but that's my question.
It could bleed over to the other rate
It
studies.
could,
Chris.
but so maybe.
But
If you
it
wanted
doesn't
to
have
adopt it,
doesn't
you
have
could.
But it
Well,
doesn't have to. Is that
It's
right?
already in
Already
electric.
Electric.
Already in
has a
electric.
I see.
5-year average.
Yeah.
That's
I see, of course, yeah.
But also the EDUs they become in the current design do
Okay.
not change.
Yeah, right now we don't have EDUs for propane.
Oh, that's right.
That rate structure is
That's a flexible,
whole
that's a very different
animal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
will-
Yeah, so I like the idea of just saying EDU would be a 5-year average. And
I think our consultant would much prefer that because then we'd really be on a defensible ground.
yeah, okay, good.
All right, is there a motion to use item 12 here, which is to change the EDU comp from an annual to a 5-year average?
That would be my motion.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconds, all in favor, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Anything else on this topic? Is there a 13 out there? Okay, let's move on to 9I, page 163. This is listed under Chief Ansel, but given that he is on an emergency call right now, I assume, Eric, you'll be able to speak to this topic.
I will do my best. What are we on?
This is the hydrant riser removal.
Yeah.
I would ask that we hold that in abeyance for Rick because I don't want to speak for him.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to wait for him.
Chris, to answer your question, on page 150 is the breakdown if you were curious still.
Wow.
As I'm forwarding through here, I stopped for you. That's for water. There's another one for
We
wastewater.
can
There'll be a
just
few
do that.
pages after, so
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
enjoy.
Okay,
Now
so
we know
Eric,
how
is
to
your
do it this
recommendation to move 9I to the next board meeting?
I would actually, we should entertain a motion to table 9I until the next board meeting.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to table agenda item 9I.
Well,
I just want to maybe summarize what I've spoken to Rick and he.
I think if we're gonna table it, we should table it.
many more are getting taken out?
before we vote whether to table it, I need to
Yeah.
understand how urgent it might be.
Well,
There's no urgency.
there's no
to it.
urgency.
We've,
Well, that's what.
we've paused removing it.
Oh.
Yes.
So
I just want to get clarification that we're not gonna remove any additional hydrant assemblies without further notice.
We will not remove any operational hydrant assemblies without further notice. If there are some that are broken, we will remove them so we can get those hydrants operational. That's an operational need.
Okay,
So if there's
Even
no,
something
if they're
that's
not
been-
broken, we're not gonna, we won't remove any.
okay.
And the only reason we removed them after talking about it since 2021 is because we had snow removal that wasn't doing anything and we wanted to keep them busy and not quit. So
Well, they got busy.
they did. So yeah, so but I'll wait,
We
No,
can
wait,
postpone this till the next meeting with the assurance that you're not gonna
No,
do any additional ones before the next meeting.
no, I said what I said.
so there's
I
not
will
gonna
not
be
do any additional that are functional.
They're
If some are
broken.
broken and we need to remove them to get a hydrant to function, then we're going to remove them.
Okay, this time of year?
Yes, if we have, if the rest of February turns out like January did,
Yeah.
Then we're gonna have snow removal crews that are gonna need to do something, and there are broken ones out there that we're aware of that have rendered the hydrants inoperable.
But I think we removed most of those already.
I don't believe that's true.
But we removed 40 of them in 1 week. And most of them were in KMA. That's where most of the failures are.
Okay, so I think, Peter, what's happening is that Eric said that they're not gonna move any more.
I'm comfortable, as long as I have that insurance.
So anything that's operational will not be removed. Sounds like if there was availability, that there are broken ones, they will remove them, and we can have a longer discussion at the next, if we table it.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Would there be any logic to asking for us to, after this meeting, a quick assessment when Rick is back in writing, email on roughly how many might be non-operating? Because I mean, if we're just talking about 2 or 3, then it's no big deal. If half the hydrants,
But if they're not operational, then wouldn't we want our hydrants to be operational? I don't know. Okay, I feel like we're doing agenda item 9I right now. So why don't we talk about 9I and have an agenda, and we will go as deep into it as we should, perhaps, because we have now spent 5 minutes talking.
well, I
about
will
this right
explain that the HOA, the president of HOA and then another board member in East Meadows came to me with some alacrity about this question. I don't even understand it, I'm willing to admit. And just wanted to know what's going on, and are they gonna do in East Meadows what they have done that Peter's describing?
Well, they
So
were getting ready to.
I can't just
So I
punt
asked them
on
to
this
stop.
and say, let's take a month off.
So fine. So I guess, Eric, why don't you present the topic? You'll follow their normal menu. I saw a hand up go in the crowd. I see a hand up on Zoom. Let's follow our normal process, talk about what this is, and we will decide as a board what action we may or may not take.
Okay. I'll refer you to Rick's staff report, which
Thank
says these are an operational issue for him as fire chief, and he would like them removed. Anyone wants to second guess the chief? Now's the chance.
No second guessing.
All right. I think, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Please stand up and please and give comment.
Yeah, I just guess have a question. I mean, the extenders were added for a reason, and I can understand removing them if they're broken. What I don't understand is if they were there for a reason and they're broken, why aren't they replaced rather than just removed?
Do you have a answer to that?
Don't work as designed.
Okay,
They don't.
Larry Parker has his hand up.
go ahead, Larry. You can unmute
Yeah,
yourself, Larry. Thanks, Larry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, how many were broken of the 40 that were removed?
I don't have that answer in front of me.
Do we know how many are currently non-functional?
No.
I guess that would be good answers to have before we get too far down this topic. Yeah, and is it just non-functional because the T-handle's crooked and needs some maintenance? And then I submitted a comment about, will these be dug out going forward by KMPUD?
Well, that's a good question.
How much is that gonna cost to maintain them dug out relative to maintaining the extenders?
Are we planning on digging these out any differently than what we do today, or how would this work?
Even with these extenders, they're buried and the extenders don't work. So yeah, they'll be dug out as much as they're dug out. They're not working for the chief.
So,
And Caldor, as we've been talking about since 2021, all the other chiefs had huge problems with these.
Also note that Chief Withrow said that this was something that was in their nexus of responsibility that they would do if we were to contract with them. As a reminder to everyone.
so are you saying that you're committed to digging out the hydrants that have been removed?
We'll dig them out as much as we dig them out now. Basically what Rick is, and I don't want to put words in Rick's mouth. If there's a fire, they're going to dig out the hydrant and get it dug out when they need it. These things don't help, is what he's saying. They don't help. So they don't do anything that they're buried now with these assemblies, they don't do anything. They don't work. They're not working.
But he removed a bunch that were working of the 40. Removed or just replaced? So Removed, they're not, they're gone.
So now you have a
They're
whole
not
bunch of
working
hydrants
from
that
an-
aren't working?
No, we have a bunch of hydrants that are totally exposed.
They're exposed?
At ground level. So in order to do snow removal, you gotta dig down an additional 12 feet from where the top of the hydrant was.
Yes.
That's why the extender were put in there. Number one, so you could find a hydrant. Number two, so it would still function when it was up to 10 or 12 feet high, full of snow. Some of them were removed, but the crew, I've heard different stories, did it on their own, removed the whole assembly, basically.
They did not do it on their own. That is absolutely false. Whoever told you that lied. They were directed to do that by the chief, who had directed Spencer's snow removal crew to do it. So if someone told you otherwise, that is a lie.
Okay, well, I was told this morning by the chief.
Yeah, no, because I was here when he gave Spencer direction, so I know he told Spencer to remove them.
Did operations committee go through this?
No, we weren't notified. The board wasn't notified. This was done.
I mean, it kind of seems like something that should.
It was done with
have a
zero
committee recommendation,
communication.
I mean, I will say that this is an operational topic that, I mean,
Not a board topic.
I don't know, the board does a lot of these sorts of things in general. So I'm trying to think of.
But
the
it's gonna
balance
have
between
a financial impact, and if I hadn't intervened, there wouldn't be any hydrants standing right now in East Meadows. Not a single one, and Juniper Ridge.
The hydrants.
The hydrants, yeah, I think that's,
The
I want to
hydrants are all there.
Extenders.
Correct.
Extenders have been
Extenders would
removed.
be all gone.
And
Yes.
some portion of whatever was removed were broken, meaning that those hydrants were not even operational at that time, is my understanding, correct?
I'm sorry, say that again, Doug.
The
There was a
the
mix.
physical hydrants
Yes.
are still there.
Yes.
There, we have not removed any fire hydrants
They're just
in
there, and they're now
KMA,
covered with a foot of snow.
which they might have been before as well. Or maybe not in January. But what was removed was the handles. Some of them, some proportion of them, which we do
Yes.
not know, were broken, meaning rendering the entire apparatus non-functional.
Yes.
Now we have fully functional fire hydrants without handles.
Yes.
And now they need, if
And
they,
without rise, and so they
Right.
need to be dug
Dug
out,
out.
because they'll get.
correct. And which is what I think Eric was saying, Rick would say they would do anyway in a case of a fire or something like that.
They would still be digging them out.
Right.
Even with the extenders still there. They would have had to still dig them out to get down to them where they were functional.
If they were functional, no, you don't need to dig down below the T handle.
All right.
I'm just
This
telling you
is-
what Rick's saying, so.
Yeah, but I would, look, if the board would the board like to have an opinion on this? I mean, let me give, is there?
I just want an agreement that no more, we've already eliminated 40 extenders.
Correct.
And they're basically, most of them, like in the East Meadows, are working. They're 30 years old. They've been operating successfully. I don't want any more extenders to be removed until further notice, until we have communication with the board.
Well, we're having agenda 9I, so the board can take action right now. And either second guess Rick or not.
Right. And so Peter, my understanding, and I'm hearing from the board recommendation is that what you are saying is operational with them being, they're crooked in half, which we can all probably agree that is that's non-functional, right? From what I am taking from this, Eric, what you're saying is the chief is saying, even if they were not bent, if they were not, they were operational from a perspective of physical integrity, they are not the chief has determined and recommended that they are not operational for other reasons. Like people do
Yes.
not have wrenches that work in them. And if they are still structurally integrity, if there was a fire over in KMI right now, they would, I'm just trying to interpret what I've heard is they would not use the T handle. And the instruction that the chief would give me and other people would be to dig it out the hydrant and go into it directly and not use a handle. Am I interpreting the
That
recommendation correctly?
That is correct.
It's so good to have a KMPUD member who knows this hands-on.
Yeah.
KVFD, sorry.
So Peter, I guess what I am hearing is that whether they are bent or not, Chief Ansell's recommendation is that we do not use, we as a fire department will not use handles anymore. Full stop. That is my interpretation of this.
Yes, or to put more simply, the chief wants them all removed.
Well, he's wanted that for a while, but that was a major investment. They've worked for 30 years. I would like to call a timeout on this project until we have more information and we explore our options, because it's going to have a fiscal impact. It's significant. We didn't budget to dig out hydrants.
But we don't, Eric, do we do that now? I mean, don't we have an adopt a hydrant program?
We would dig it out if we needed to get access to it.
Well, and if you dig one out, you get on the Facebook page.
But I guess what I'm saying is, do we budget? I mean, I'm asking, like, to stress this question, do we budget for snow removal of hydrants right now?
No, but we wouldn't need to budget for it.
Can I,
The fire,
I have a recommendation. There's an EOP meeting next Wednesday. And Peter and I discuss it with
Yeah.
Rick and then report
And
back to the
take
board.
no action until after that committee.
It's just, we're only talking about 4 days.
I mean, it's snow next week, so I probably won't have people available anyway.
There we go.
So,
Okay.
so the agreement right now would be that you are going to not remove anything that is structurally integrated until further notice.
Until after next Wednesday.
Okay, great.
See, one of the things that I wanted to bring up is that the latest, these risers have evolved over 30 years. The last batch that was put in up in the Palisades has a handle that unbolts, so you can easily remove the T handle. And what I would like to see done this summer when we do our typical maintenance is convert. And that's why I came up with these two drawings that compare what the original extenders looked like. They were welded from the T handle to the riser. They were welded. And what the newer ones are, they've designed where you can just bolt them in and easily remove the handle.
Yeah. So what I would say is EOP can come forward and discuss it and then
Yeah.
give a recommendation, because that would be a capital expense to redo all of them too, right?
Yeah.
So let's come forward with a recommendation.
That's, to me, that's an option, a viable option, and it addresses some of the problems with turning the handles. They've gotten, after 30 years of being in one position, they're getting harder, as you probably experienced.
Okay. Well, I would say EOP will take this up Wednesday, and if it comes back to the board, then
When does the
when it
agenda need to go out? Today.
Yeah, so there is no EOP. Well, no, if I did it before 2, right?
Hmm?
If I did it
48
before
hours,
2?
yeah?
No, it's 72 hours.
Well, is that 72 hours calendar or is it work days?
Wednesday to Tuesday at 2. No, you're right. It's too late. We can move the EOP to another date though.
Yeah, why don't you move EOP to the following one, another date, maybe consider that if
I'll
that's.
send out an email to the committee and see what.
I will let
availability
EOP
is
figure
there.
this out. How about that?
Just curious, when you say we'll dig it out, is we, the KBFD or utility?
KVFD when we go to
The fire
a
visit.
fire. So,
Thank you.
EOP will figure this out and back with
Report
a
back.
recommendation. Thank you,
Yeah.
report back. All right, let us go on to 10, major project updates.
Nothing's really changed now that we have the propane master plan. We're gonna be able to start on the rate study for that. Now that we have the answers on wastewater, wastewater rate study, that'll also be on target, so. And now that the master plan's adopted, we can start, well, the design's ostensibly mostly done for the roof, so that's nice, so. But I'd like to get the rate study in place. We do have some reserves in propane, which is good, but I'd like to get the rate study in place, so. We may end up deferring that capital plan out to 25, 26, just so we can get some rates built up, but that'll be a discussion later, so. But other than that, possibly moving that whole last line item on major projects, everything else is tracking. And finance will have budget assumptions in 2 weeks to discuss.
Thank you. Any questions on item 10? Okay, let's go on to 11, general manager's report.
I think we've covered everything.
Great. Number 12, operations report.
Let me see if Rick left anything for me. Usually has his fire calls, but I do not see it, so nothing to add there.
We'll say we've had a few,
Yeah, at least 2.
at least 2 today.
At least 2 today.
Yeah.
But I know there've been multiple interesting ones recently.
Yeah. Which means on average, we're having 60 a month. Yeah.
No, there've been some interesting calls that have come through. Okay. 13, standing committee reports, finance, John.
No, we went through the financials and the audit report. There's nothing else to add.
Thank you. Peter, EOP.
We didn't meet.
Great. Bob, IT and cybersecurity.
Didn't meet.
Communications, we've met twice. The notes are in the board packet. The focus right now is, as we discussed earlier, the community forum outreach and the community forums on KVFD. Personnel, we did not meet. LAFCO, we did not meet. Any questions on standing committees? Okay. 14, temporary advisory committees, we do not have any. Item 15, this is general board discussion. Any general board discussion? The only general board discussion item I had was to build on what Bob has alluded to. I would just recommend, Eric, that we just have all packets go to everyone, every committee. And that way you can see rate studies and things like that in the draft form before.
Yeah, the other one, I think if there's confidential personnel information, you might withhold that until there's more clarity on situation.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll be in charge of that one, and I'll just gauge what's in the packet.
Perfect. Thank you.
Because I know, like, next week, 2 weeks we have personnel. 3 weeks we have finance.
2 weeks.
1 week we have comms.
Communications,
Anyway, the employee handbook annual update with all the latest laws from California will be in there. So that's probably one that's good to get out to the board early. So I might just send that under separate cover.
Okay. Anything else for agenda item 15? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to 16 and we'll adjourn this meeting and note that the next regular board meeting is scheduled for Friday, March 7th, 2025 at 2 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thanks to the community for the comments today.